All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order, and roll call. All members of council are present here and accounted for. To the members, is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest on the agenda as presented to you this evening? None indicated, and so we'll certainly have that reflective in the minutes to be disclosed. In the introduction, well, first of all, I want to welcome council administration and our delegations here this evening. I want to, as well, those who are also streaming from the comforts of your home for our public meeting. So the introduction this evening to the general public and to the members is the purpose of our meeting is to hear public comments on the applications for an official plan and zoning bylaw amendments for a proposed residential condominium development on a parcel of land located at 12433 Dillon Drive. The application for the proposed official plan amendment is requesting redesignation of the lands from community facility to residential. In the proposed zoning bylaw amendment requests a change in zoning from community facility zone and residential zone 1 R1 to a site-specific residential zone 3 R3-16. The proposed R3-16 zone would permit the proposed residential uses and include site-specific zone provisions, as well as a definition for the term stacked townhouse dwelling units. I will ask our director of building and services and our manager of planning services to provide a brief overview and of the building services report, which is the planning and building services -2021-12, in order to, number one, explain the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications. 2, indicate the revised supporting reports from the applicant's consulting team. And 3, summarize the concerns raised at the September 10th, 2019 public meeting. And certainly after that, we will hear from the applicant and then delegates that have registered to speak at tonight's meeting or have asked that their comments be read into the record. And so some of the I guess housekeeping items, I think, critical because we do have a very, very ambitious agenda and many delegations this evening. As authorized in the town's procedural bylaw, so as mayor, I'm limiting the delegation speaking time to each delegate to 5 minutes. In the interest of time, we ask that certainly you avoid repeating the same information presented by others. The delegates' cameras and microphones are to be turned off and muted until it is their turn on the agenda to address council. The clerk will raise her hand when there is 1 minute remaining in each delegate's speaking time to signify time to wrap up their respective presentations. Delegations in our viewing audience may submit any additional comments on the proposed amendment in writing to the clerk's office by end of business day tomorrow. Written submissions received to date have been listed on the agenda for this evening's meeting. And members of council, the purpose of the public meeting tonight is to hear from all parties with respect to the applications before us and to ask questions about the development and proposal. No decision will be taken tonight. Administration will return to us with a report in future summarizing all of the input and making final recommendations on the said applications. Mr. Hillman and Mr. Jeffrey, please again provide an explanation of the proposed official plan and zoning amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, members of council. Sean, if we could start with attachment 1, please. So Sean's going to show us, there we are. So this is the subject, the 2.29 hectare subject property It's located south of Dillon Drive in between Lacoste and St. Pierre. And there's a portion of it that has frontage on Little River Boulevard. As you know, and as you can see from this aerial photo, the site is the location of the former Victoria Public School. And it also consists of the former McCall right-of-way along the eastern portion of it. Attachment 3 of our report, please, Sean. So this process began, and many of you will remember, back in November of 2019, when the proposal that was presented at a public information center that was held by the applicants illustrated a 6-story apartment building in the center of the subject property, surrounded by townhouses along the perimeter of that property. And that proposal totaled 96 units. Now, there were a number of people out at the Public Information Center, and a number of comments were provided to both proponents and administration attended just to understand the nature of the conversations that were being had. After this, the proponents reconsidered their initial proposal and submitted a revised proposal, which is attachment 4 in our report, Sean, that included a total of 63 units, comprising 2 stacked townhouses. One stacked townhouse is at the front, a 16-unit stacked townhouse at the front of the property, or north of the property along Dillon, and a 24-unit stacked townhouse in the middle of the property that's shaded in brown here. And then along the westerly and southerly limits of the property were townhouse units. And these are 2-story townhouse units. The stacked townhouses are 3-story in height. This proposal is proposed to be condominium ownership, meaning the roads and amenities are privately owned. There's a road with access to Dillon Drive in this case. And there's also a proposed park that would ultimately be conveyed to the municipality, and a stormwater management facility that would be maintained by the owners of the condominium that are situated along the south side of Dillon Drive. So planning applications related to this proposal were submitted to the town in July of 2019. A formal public meeting was then held shortly after in September of 2019. And again, many of the people that were at the initial Public Information Center attended this formal public meeting. A number of concerns and issues were raised at that. And as a result, the proponents took another look at their proposal, made some revisions to it, and then came back with a revised proposal, which is in attachment 5, Sean, of our report. And I'll highlight the changes to the proposal that were made along the southerly lot line, south of the yellow and orange buildings. The setback, or the rear yard, was increased from 10 meters to 14.1 meters, and that's roughly 33 feet to 46 feet. And that was in an attempt to preserve some of the mature trees that exist along the southerly lot line. The 6-unit townhouse block that was beside the orange block in this image was divided into 2 3 townhouse blocks, and one was located along the west side of that internal private road. And that broke up the massing a bit in this area. The northerly stacked townhouse in bright orange on this illustration was moved marginally 5 feet toward Dillon to accommodate the increase in rear yard depth along the south part of the property. The block there in blue represents an enclosed garage structure that replaced surface parking. And the total number of parking spaces has been decreased from 152 to 144. And finally, you'll see little circles with what look like trees in the middle of them, and that represents the trees that they are proposing to preserve on the site. And that was as a result of a tree preservation report that the proponents had commissioned. So along with this site plan drawing, there are a number of artist renderings, and if we'll just scroll through those just to get everyone a sense of what the proposal looks from the ground level. So this is looking at the stacked townhouses, looking southerly from Dillon Street. Next one, Sean, please. And that's the northern townhouse that's facing Dillon Drive. Okay, next one, please. Again, the central stacked townhouse looking south. Central stacked townhouse and western townhouse units facing southwest. The western townhouse units, and that's facing west. Along with the southern townhouse units facing south. So those are some architectural elevation drawings just to give everyone a sense of what this development looks like from the ground level. Now, accompanying the applications for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment were a number of documents, supporting documents. And in this new proposal, or their latest proposal, there are some documents that were basically updates to previous documents that were submitted or addendums to them, including an addendum to the planning report by Zlinka Preamble Limited. We've read the report and we generally agree that its analysis and conclusions are reasonable. There was an updated traffic report that was reviewed by Dillon, and comments were provided, and the traffic engineers, which were RC Spencer and Associates, had an opportunity to respond to the comments that were provided from administration. And again, the town and Dillon Consulting, after reviewing it, has concluded that there will be no adverse effect on the surrounding traffic operations. There was also an updated servicing report that the administration again had Dillon review, and the proponent had an opportunity to respond to some of the questions that were posed to them. And at the end of this, our assessment is that the subject property and the local municipal services, the water, the sanitary, and storm are adequate to support this proposed development. Now, there may be some small refinements as the process proceeds, but for the most part, the servicing can support the development that's proposed. And then finally, there was a tree assessment report and a tree preservation plan that was conducted, and the town's arborist reviewed that and agreed with its finding, and that resulted in a number of trees being identified for preservation. So the report that we went through with those artistic renderings and the last site plan that we reviewed is what is before council and the interested stakeholders tonight to discuss at this public meeting. I'm now going to turn it over to Brian, who will speak in a little more detail about the comments that were received at the first public meeting.
Thank you, Chad. And through you, Mr. Mayor, welcome and good evening to everyone. So what we have tried to do in a very summary form is identify the key issues that were identified through the public consultation process today. And we have 6 that we've identified. I'm going to go through them in a very, hopefully, efficient manner, but of course the document is available for review as part of the agenda and in written form on this format this evening. So there are 6 themes that we have identified that came through loud and clear through this consultation process, and it's a very engaged public, which is very good to see. And starting with the question around needs. So some of the questions that came in were the town already has enough condo developments. We don't need this type of housing. This style of development's not suitable for seniors because there's no elevators, and so on. So we have looked through those comments and given them some consideration. And on page 11 of our report, we speak to the fact that from a general policy perspective, from our perspective, the provincial policy statement, which is a guiding document put out by the province, the County of Essex official plan, and the Tecumseh official plan, all make a very strong case for residential infill. And this is a classic case where a school has now left a neighborhood and it leaves a bit of a donut hole in the middle of the neighborhood, and intensification. Providing for a mix of and a range of housing opportunities and tenures. As most will know on this meeting this evening, a good majority of the housing stock in Tecumseh is single unit dwellings, about 80%. And when we look at it in the context of this actual neighborhood, it is highly predominant single unit. We would certainly acknowledge that. And there are alternative housing forms, except for a few semi-detached, well over a kilometer away, and certainly for an apartment style, it's in excess of 2 kilometers. So we recognize that anyone looking to divest themselves in this general neighborhood from a single family home, which is an ongoing demographic trend, they would be forced probably to move out of the neighborhood to look at alternative types of housing. A diverse housing stock is generally deemed essential to meet the needs of all citizens within a community and a changing community through demographic change. Certainly an aging population has different needs, and aging can happen anywhere in a cycle of life where one's desires to maintain a yard, own a house, and the classic home ownership, those are changing over time. So we know that a diverse housing stock is very important, and one that is close to services and transit as well. So from our perspective, on a very general sense, we do believe there is a need for the type of housing that is being proposed. The second issue that came through loud and clear was with respect to the density of the proposed development. Too dense, commonly referred to, proposed number of housing units not in keeping with surrounding area or the official plan. So again, we have reflected on that, and a couple of comments that we would like to make that are reflected in our report. The medium density residential designation in the official plan establishes a maximum of 30 units per hectare, which is a measure of density. The proposed 63 unit proposal that we have in front of everyone this evening calculates to a density of 28 units for the gross. And then when we back out the parkland proposed, it would be 29 units per net hectare, which is within the medium density designation of the official plan. Now, with respect to density, one of the key considerations is to ensure the proposed development can be properly integrated into the surrounding area. Critical issue this evening. And by way of example, what was commonly referred to at the Public Information Center and through discussions with members of the public is there was a desire and a preference for the development that's sitting at just south of the Legion, St. Anne Arms, which is 12 units, 2 buildings, 6 each, 2.5 stories in height. And that actually has a calculated density of 63 units per hectare. So the subject development before council on the existing subject property is just under 30, and that sample is 63, which speaks to you can incorporate higher densities of development in areas that have single unit dwellings surrounding them, which is the case on the St. Anne's Arms development, and it can still fit within the community. Appropriately integrated intensification is encouraged in all areas where it can be adequately serviced. Projected traffic generation can be accommodated on the transportation network, and we can ensure that there's compatibility between uses that can be achieved. And we'll speak to compatibility just shortly. And servicing and transportation, Chad has taken note of in terms of the perspective that we have on that issue. And just as a note, that Tecumseh Transit Service does service this area of the town and is an alternative form of transportation for this site. One of the things that we think it's very important to have regard to is the existing regulatory framework. What is the existing zoning that applies to the land and what could be developed on the land? Under the current community facility zone, which certainly permitted the school that was there, there's a broad list of uses that are permitted, including senior citizen housing at 37 units per gross hectare, again, and a 3-story height. So the proposal that Briday has brought forward is for just under 30 units per hectare with a 3-story height for some of the units, 2 for others. And the current zoning allows a higher density and a equal 3 stories in height with a slightly shallower setback from the side yards under the current community facility zoning. So we think that speaks to, we have a location where there is already an intention in the planning documents to allow some level of intensification to take place. In summary, we've come to the conclusion that the density as proposed is appropriate at this location and will result in suitable form of intensification and appropriate form of development. The third issue that was raised is with respect to compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood. And the comments provided in our words were the proposed development and housing type is not compatible with abutting lands. 2- and 3-story dwellings will reduce privacy of existing homeowners There will be an increase in noise and light pollution, and a 32-foot rear yard or setback from a lot line is not sufficient for a 2-story townhouse. Now, compatibility, I think, is certainly a critical issue anytime we're looking at land use changes. So our comments are as follow on this issue. Generally, there's an accepted planning tenet that speaks to just the nature of residential is compatible with residential. Multi-unit residential adjacent to single units is a built form and land use mix that certainly currently exists in the community. And compatibility is achieved by addressing differences in scale and massing through building orientation, building design, site design, buffering, and appropriate setbacks, which we'll speak to. One of the things that we like to speak to is that compatible with something is not the same as being the same as or even similar to something else.
Mr. Hillman?
Yeah.
Could you just hold on for a second? Mr. Innocenti, I think if you could mute your computer at this stage here, so we can get the full coverage of what Mr. Hillman is saying.
You muted it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So being compatible with is fundamentally implies being capable of existing together in harmony. That is the desirable outcome of being compatible. It can be addressed through land use and design. With respect to land use and the location of the 3-story stacked townhouses, which of course has some potential to be slightly higher and can have oversight issues. Two things come to mind for us. One is the stacked townhouse at the north end of the development is adjacent to the municipal park, and one is adjacent to the central area of the site. So Sean, if you could go to attachment 2, it will just help to speak to this issue. And these locations for the 3-story components help to mitigate against potential any shadowing or intrusive overlook. So attachment 2, thank you, Sean. And Sean, if you could zoom in just a little bit, if that's possible on this, there we go, and then shift it. Thank you very much. And of course, everybody's bearings, Dillon to the north, of course, Little River to the south. So the taller buildings are situated on the site where they have limited impact as we see it from a compatibility perspective with the surrounding land uses. The owner revised the proposal by increasing the setback along the rear yards of the southerly lot line. And Chad spoke to an area where, as the hand is moving across the drawing, those were trees identified through the tree preservation study for protection. So the units that are just north of them have been shifted to from 32 feet to a 46-foot setback. So there'd be 46 feet between the lot line that's in red and the new proposed units. In addition to the massing of the buildings on the south side were broken up slightly as well. The positioning and the orientation of the proposed buildings on the subject land has considered the position and an orientation of buildings on adjacent lands. And what we mean by that is the northerly stacked townhouses address the street. They overlook a park, they overlook a stormwater area, and they actually have a visual orientation where they open onto the street. So occupants would be looking out to the public realm. It's not a blank wall. It actually is a form of development. Just as the front of a house looks upon the street, the front of that development would be oriented to the street. The centrally located stacked townhouses are set back a considerable distance from the easterly lot line, where there are very deep residential lots to the east. And in addition, the rear yards of the 2-story townhouses that go along the westerly edge of the site and where the hand is moving, and along the southerly edge of the site have an orientation so that their rear yards face the rear yards of the homes on St. Pierre and Little River Boulevard, which is as you even look at this map, you can see that's sort of the normal structural orientation of buildings common to this community, the rear yard backing onto a rear yard. So this is a common residential relationship. In terms of the building design, the height of the proposed townhouses adjacent to the westerly and southerly lot lines are actually less than what is permitted by the current community facility zone. They'll be approximately 26 feet in height, and that zone allows 34.8. And it's less than the maximum height allowed in the residential R1 and R2 zone. So very much consistent with the housing that would be anticipated and allowed through a residential R1 and R2 zones in terms of height. Lighting was raised as an issue. There will be a photometric plan required through a separate process under site plan control if this development were to proceed. Photometric plans consider ensuring reduction and no light spillover onto adjacent lands. And of course, fencing, landscaping will be used to ensure there is an appropriate design on the property. So through our analysis of the layout of the site, the nature of the use, the positioning of buildings, we have come to the conclusion, and based on the massing, that this would qualify as a development that is compatible with the adjacent residential uses. The fourth issue, Mr. Mayor, is with respect to traffic impact. Mr. Jeffrey has spoke to the analysis that was undertaken, the review that has been undertaken by the town, and the conclusion is that the existing transportation network is adequate to accommodate the anticipated increase in traffic that would result from this development. And we certainly recognize that traffic is commonly referred in any development that comes forward as having potential impacts. And we are confident that the analysis shows this will function acceptably. The fifth item, Mr. Mayor, is infrastructure to support the proposed development. Generally, the comments were that there's inadequate infrastructure, stormwater, sanitary, gas lines, power. Dillon Drive should be upgraded with new infrastructure before development occurs, and this development will increase flooding. There's certainly more detailed information that can be provided if needed through our engineering division, but in summary, as Mr. Jeffrey has indicated, and as is common through development processes, a professional engineer has provided an analysis to the town, which has been peer reviewed by the town and its consultant, and it's concluding that there is adequate water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure and design solutions to support the proposed development. And now on the issue of Dillon Drive, administration agrees that the existing cross-section does warrant improvements on Dillon at this location in this area, and that we will continue to work with the owner of the development through the site plan process, if it goes to that, to identify the specific improvements and develop an appropriate cost-sharing methodology. And finally, Mr. Mayor, the final sixth issue is regarding safe access relative to this being within a Lake St. Clair flood-prone area. This is an area that is under the influence of flooding from Lake St. Clair and is an issue with respect to the provincial policy statement. And it's not just this property, it's significant areas throughout the northerly parts of Tecumseh. And IRC has certainly raised the issue through the initial commencement of this development process. And ultimately, after much work, it has been resolved that in order to ensure there is safe access available to the property under a flooding event, which is a requirement of the provincial policy statement, that there has been a review by our fire chief and community emergency management coordinator, and it's been confirmed that the subject land would be accessible for emergency response during a flooding event. And as such, safe access for the subject property can be provided in accordance with the provincial policy statement, which is an important hurdle to overcome. Mr. Mayor, those are the six issues that were thematically heard through the process that was followed at the last public meeting, and council asked us to report on those, and that is our report. It's provided to assist council in evaluating the application, and this meeting we're having this evening is very much anticipated to provide an opportunity to hear comments and feedback on the revised proposal from interested stakeholders. Mr. Mayor, just to help everyone to orient their thinking on this process, currently it's anticipated that coming out of this evening, we will further evaluate comments and issues raised, and it would be proposed that we would review them and bring a final report to council at some date in the future for consideration. And we look very much forward to hearing the comments this evening and the information to be provided by the developer as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hillman and Mr. Jeffries for your remarks. And so now we'll proceed to deal with our delegations this evening. And again, first on the delegation list is Mr. Casey Cole-Chicky. You're gonna have to forgive me on the pronunciation, but Cole-Chicky, Senior Planner, and John Kirpan, Engineer, Zelenka Priamo Limited. Mr. David Ublansky, President of Briday Victoria Development Corporation.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and members of council and members of the public in attendance tonight. My name is Casey Cole-Chicky. You did get it bang on there, Mayor. So thank you for that. As noted, I am a senior planner with Zelenka Priamo Limited, representing Briday Developments. Joining me tonight is David Ublansky from Briday, as well as John Kirpan from OD&D Group, our civil engineer. I'll be brief with my comments. Chad and Brian did a wonderful summary of the development timeline and the proposal that is before you tonight. We have reviewed the report. We are in agreement with your analysis as it has been provided. I will offer a point of clarification and an apology on behalf of myself. It's come to my attention that a small snippet of my planning addendum has been taken out of context and has made its rounds through various written and verbal correspondence, and that speaks to the character of the neighborhood. That line is part of a larger paragraph, which is in response to a policy within the County of Essex official plan. The policy in question states that where possible, new development in older established areas of historic, architectural, or landscape value shall be encouraged to develop in a manner consistent with the overall character of these areas. Established areas of value are typically identified through the local official plan process by way of secondary plans or community plans, special policy areas, or heritage conservation districts. These tools would identify features or attributes that contribute to the value and character for new development to draw from. The town of Tecumseh's official plan does not have any of these tools currently in place for this neighborhood, and an analysis conducted by myself of the neighborhood reflected a variety of architectural styles, landscape treatments, and overall landscaping on the individual properties. There was no single identifiable consistent overall character and to draw from for the inspiration to the design of the proposed development. That itself is reflective of this established, stable, beautiful community. Everyone has their own unique identity, property to property. That being said, new development still needs to be cognizant of the surroundings, and the proposed buildings draw inspiration from the former school building with regards to building materials, building elements, rhythm, symmetry, and also pulls building materials found throughout the surrounding homes to achieve a design similar to the former building. The line no overall character was not meant to be a slight to this community. It was merely a response to a design direction in the county's official plan. And I do apologize to the members of this community. It was not my intent to offend any of the residents with my verbiage. That concludes my statement, and I'm going to be on hand as well as our team to help answer any questions that members of council may have. I am going to pass the mic over to David Ublansky from Briday at this point, as he would like to say a few words. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Casey. Mayor, councilors, administration, staff, and all those present here this evening. My name, as you heard, is David Ublansky, and I am the president of Briday Development. I'm going to begin by assuring everyone that I've listened to the concerns that were voiced by residents in the area. And I will say that my team of expert consultants have completed a great amount of work involving studies and reports, engineering and planning, traffic, arborist reports that have led us to examine and re-examine adjust and revise, and successfully address the concerns that we have heard. As a developer, this is what we sometimes experience during the planning process. Keep in mind that development is a thorough process, and I have an excellent track record in Tecumseh with respect to bringing a high-end product to this town that will not result in adverse conditions to the area or to existing properties. There are many Tecumseh residents who not only reside in my previous developments, but around them as well. And these residents would be the first to support the quality and standards that I produce. Last time we met, there was the concern that the development was too intensified, yet the size of these homes will range from 1,200 to 3,000 square feet. And the footprint of the entire proposal sits very comfortably on this property. It is by no means too large or too intensified. Privacy concerns were voiced as well, and I can say that appropriate measures have been designed to address these concerns. Landscaping, increased setbacks, as we've heard, the positioning of the townhomes themselves, as well as the placement of the stacked townhomes in the center of the property, buffered with a one-level covered parking area that will also mitigate privacy concerns. Residents have asked, who are the townhomes marketed for? And I can tell you that Victoria by the Lake will be marketed to all buyers, from the young business professional to new families, empty nesters, and seniors alike. As far as the senior accessibility and accessibility in general is concerned, we will in fact be more accessible than Carmelita Court, a development that we heard a lot about as a comparison at the previous meeting. It's important to understand that Carmelita Court are all two-story buildings as well. They have a basement level and a main floor, just like the townhomes that I'm proposing here at Victoria by the Lake. However, both stories at Victoria by the Lake will be above the ground. There will be no basements and no flooding concerns. Further, the floor plans will offer a main floor master bedroom layout, as well as the option for residential elevator lifts. And I'm quite certain that in-home elevators are not offered in any other development in the area. I also want to take this opportunity to address some false information that is being spread on social media, that's being emailed to residents and delivered throughout handouts and flyers with the intention to misinform the surrounding property owners. The stacked townhomes are not, quote, a 3-story walk-up only option. As far as the stacked townhomes are concerned, they will in fact provide 8 exclusive units that are completely a main floor ground living level, completely accessible with no walk-ups or stairs. Further, I should add that this proposal is not, quote, an ugly slum-inducing development, nor will this development, quote, ruin the area. I really need to emphasize that there should not be this spread happening, and shame on those who are printing this libelous false information. The homes in this development will be of equal and greater value than what is currently present in the area. This will be a high-end, well-planned new build. It will be a top-of-the-line product. It will be a brick development enhanced with stucco and other high-grade material accents throughout. There has been much time spent putting careful thought and effort into the exterior of the townhomes that echo the former Victoria School. A deep red brick color has been chosen to honor the school. There are brick patterns that frame the sides of the stacked townhomes that were also present at the entrance of the original portion of the school. The name itself is respectful of the history as well. Moving inside, the interiors will be second to none. Current townhouses have been selling in excess of $600,000 and even higher in areas of Lakeshore and LaSalle that are comparable to the Victoria site here in Tecumseh. This will be a very desirable development that will have all the amenities offered in a condo corporation, from general maintenance to lawn care, snow removal, and an overall carefree living. The proposal today for Victoria by the Lake is appropriate and represents good planning practices. It's sound planning, it's superior engineering, and excellent architectural design. I would like to also share that I've had and continue to have a tremendous amount of interest in this property from buyers in Tecumseh and all the surrounding areas. I've been approached by many real estate agents, prominent builders, and construction companies, all of whom represent potential purchasers that are interested in this specific proposed development. These purchasers, who will be the future residents of Tecumseh, want to live in this development, and I am very excited to see this project come to market. I'm certain that it will enhance the area and continue to grow the heart of Tecumseh into the thriving community that it is. And having said all this, I too live in the community, and I would only and will only develop something that I am proud to have in my neighborhood. I want to thank everyone again for this opportunity to speak here this evening. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Blansky. I don't know if anyone else within your organization, I know Mr. Kirpan he'll be held for questions.
Yeah, I think Mr. Camper will be here in case there are questions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to call on next our deputy clerk to read some written submissions to be read, and to the deputy clerk, if you could just name the individuals and
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have one written submission that Ann Dougal, who submitted it on March 16th, would like me to read it into for council and members of council. This is the information to the mayor and council, introducing myself, why we need to say yes, application and amendment, why I trust Tecumseh Council to have my best interest at heart. My future is people, old friends, and new friends to be welcomed with openness, forming a community with gatherings for all. That's what she has to say. Thank you.
okay, thank you for the submission. Next, also to read a submission, Ms. Tamaratino.
Yes, hello, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm reading the submission on behalf of Lucy Piera, who lives across from the proposed development on Dillon. Here we go. I'm writing my objections because I don't have internet at my house, so therefore I'm unable to participate in this meeting. The following are my objections to Briday's development proposal. Briday's revised proposal still exceeds the density requirements under the current official plan. Briday tries to hide this by saying that it will fit within the new draft official plan that hasn't been fully approved yet. Our current official plan says the type of density Briday wants is too high for the area. Briday proposes 63 units. That is a greater density than the villages of Riverside and Windsor, now known as Little River Acres. But the horrible overcrowding is still there. Briday exceeds the height restrictions of our neighborhood. The stacked townhomes are higher than the 3 stories that are allowed. These are 3-story walk-ups with ground floor, but they still have to walk up to the 2nd and 3rd stories. They won't benefit anybody, especially seniors. Briday claims selfishly that it will be good for seniors. I would like to see seniors having an option of living on this property. They will be welcomed as they will provide calm to this neighborhood. Briday says that our neighborhood has no common features or anything of note, so it doesn't matter that their proposal is different. They claim our neighborhood of 1- and 2-story homes do not count as special, so they can do what they want. Lucy goes on to say that Briday wants to build an enclosed 1-story parking garage. This will be an additional overcrowding of buildings to the already overcrowding of buildings they propose. How much visual natural space do we have to give up? I strongly object to this. The neighborhood is already experiencing heavy traffic due to the additional mailboxes on Dillon Drive. We're up to 128 now, and the Tecumseh Transit bus. Higher traffic will be more dangerous to the families with young children. The children play and walk to their nearby bus stops. Flooding is a high concern for the neighborhood, especially on Dillon Drive across from the development site. My basement and garage were flooded. Water was right up to my house. Then in September 2017, the torrential rainwater came halfway up to my property. Extremely difficult to go through this again. The old Victoria School parking lot property in south side of Dillon, across from my house, is so much higher than the properties of my neighbors and I on the north side. And I note that the proposal will elevate its own lands. There are only 2 storm sewers at sidewalk level across the street from Old Victoria School, one in front of me and the other in front of my neighbor. They are overwhelmed all the time with rainwater and can't keep up. We're nearing the end. They seep up 1/3 to 1/2 way up my front yard and my neighbors, not to mention flooding right up to our homes. The sidewalks remain flooded for hours after draining. This is very stressful. I am also concerned that the water pressure will be diminished with the overcrowding of dwellings. Our neighborhood was built in conforming with the current plan. We don't want our neighborhood to be changed just because a greedy developer wants to make a high profit. I am asking that town council protect the residents, not the developer who wants to make every possible profit it wants to. There's a compromise available. Briday can build 1-story townhouses that are the most popular style now in a density of about 36 units, the same density as Carmelita Court. Regards, Lucy Piera. That's the end of her submission.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Tino, for reading that. And that will be included also in the record. All right. Now it's I'm calling upon Martha and James Vandresco, residents.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think all of our concerns have been answered through the presentation. The only one that I had was the stormwater retention pond, whether that'll be allowed to drain in between storms, or so wouldn't be the possibility of having stagnant water. And will it be fenced as there's an adjacent playground? And that's my only question.
Okay. Well, we'll certainly, those questions will be given to our engineers and certainly our planners, as well as there'll be an opportunity for the developer to answer your questions, Mr. and Mrs. Vandresco.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep. If you want to go
Sorry,
ahead.
it's Brian. If I could, I think we can give a really quick response, at least, and I think Phil Bartnick, our town engineer, is here as well. Briefly, it is designed to be a dry pond, and I'll let Phil explain what that is. It would be a depression in the ground. Currently not anticipated that it would be fenced. That is certainly a design detail that we will look at. The desire of the town is that it actually would form a part of the open space feature, that it actually would look like a valuable asset to the community. It's not intended to look like a piece of infrastructure that has no other functions. But that kind of detail is certainly something that would be worked on further, and Mr. Bartnick could explain, what it means to be a dry pond, for example. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I guess I can just take over until Gary gets back. Okay, thank you, Mr. Hillman. Mr. Bartnick?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to add on to Mr. Hillman's comments. So the dry pond would remain dry in some of the smaller rain events. Storage and water in that dry pond would occur in some of those larger events where the water has to be held back and attenuated. It is designed to drain as the storm passes, and there is capacity in the sewers, and that pond will drain out and remain dry during normal periods. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bartnick. Mr. Vandresco, does that answer your questions?
Yes, that's all I wanted to say. I'm pleased to see the 6-story structure eliminated, and the buildings are aesthetically pleasing now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Vandresco. Next is Ms. Tino as resident.
Yes, good evening, and thank you for allowing me this chance to speak. I'll keep an eye on the clock. All right. The public plays an essential role in the planning process because planning decisions made by council directly affect us. We hope you're listening to us. As we have said all along, we are not opposed to development of a former school property. However, we want good development, and we don't consider this application to be good for our neighborhood. Please refer to my submission for the first public meeting and also my submission for this meeting. Both are very much on point in this juncture. Our official plan explicitly states that it is comprehensive. It is a comprehensive legal document to guide and direct future development in a logical and orderly manner to enhance Tecumseh's image as a better place to live, bolster community pride. Our plan goes on to insist it is the duty of the town to preserve and improve the quality of life. We don't think this proposal does any of that. Briday and Mr. Hillman assert that the proposal is acceptable, relying on imprecise terms such as moderate increase, close proximity, and character to justify the proposal. But in terms of specifics, Briday's proposal still fails to meet our official plan standards. The stacked townhomes are not permitted under our plan. The density is too great for a local road. Dillon is a local road. Medium density doesn't belong there, and our plan says so. The density is too great for the surrounding area. Briday wants a density 240% greater than the surrounding neighborhood. The scale is incompatible. Only 28% of the surrounding neighborhood is two-story homes, but 100% of the Briday development is 2 stories or greater. The height of the 2 largest buildings exceeds the maximum height allowance. Finally, parkland for residents in our area is seriously deficient, and Briday's overcrowded density units make this even more glaring. Speaking of parkland deficiencies, please refer to the March 29, 2021 report submitted by my planner, Tom Story, which sets out the figures mandated by our current official plan and even our draft official plan, and the calculation showing where the town has failed this area in the past, and with this new development will do so even more. Excuse me. Our official plan is quite explicit regarding the land needed for recreational purposes in town neighborhoods. It is also clear that school sites play an important role for parkland in the community. Before Briday purchased the property, Mr. Hillman himself confirmed to me that according to the official plan, we were under service for parkland in our community. Now, with the school gone, our parkland is that much more diminished, and it is not made up for by the small park provision from Briday. As you will see, the net result is that approval of Briday's development in its present form will result in a parkland inventory for Area 1 of only about 17% of the minimum necessary in our official plan. The provincial policy statement says it is important that healthy, sustainable communities have necessary public facilities, including parks, available to meet current and projected needs. It goes on to insist that intensification should take this into account as well. The County of Essex plan incorporates the same language, yet neither Briday nor our town planners considered this important mandate from the province and the county. With regard to the neighborhood, we have all made note of Briday's unmitigated gall in saying there's no overall outstanding character. Well, too little, too late. Briday insults us all, and its dismissive statements are designed to ensure Briday gets its way, and the town planners agree with all of it. Briday announces that its proposal will ensure that the town can meet the 15-year supply of land designated for residential development. But according to Brian Hillman's comments during the January 26, 2021 council meeting, Tecumseh has an excess of 25 years of land supply, which is quite significant given the growth forecast. He went on to say the town has not hit previously projected growth targets upon which the supply is based. He said he is comfortable with the land designated for potential development for a long period of time going forward. And recent town planning reports bear this out when they identify and map out all available land for infilling and intensification, and the former school property is still counted as a school and not even part of the available land. We just don't need Briday's form of over-intensification. I only have a couple more things to say. have heard from some counselors that they are concerned about a possible appeal by the developer. I cannot imagine why. Briday's basis for any appeal will simply be that of a petulant temper tantrum boiled down to, Tecumseh has an official plan and they want me to follow it, but I don't want to. Oh well. We continue to put forward a solution to all the issues of Briday's proposals. We would like to see one-story townhomes, perhaps with some two-story units, in a density matching that of the Carmelita Court development. This means about 34 units, perhaps even up to 40 units would be acceptable. We are confident that this will render a very handsome profit to Mr. Ublansky and satisfy the neighborhood. And from recent LPAT decisions, we know that the tribunal looks favorably indeed on alternate proposals submitted by residents. Thank you for your time. We remain hopeful that you will protect this area from Briday's non-compliant development proposal, which will irrevocably harm this town. Thank you.
Your worship, you're muted.
Yeah, that would work. I think after a year, we'd have this zooming thing down pat. Thank you, Mrs. Tino. And you're still on, Ms. Tino, you're acting as the agent for Connor Tino, resident.
Very
Go ahead.
good. Connor has asked me to read this. I would like to thank council for allowing me to address you regarding Briday's development application for the former Victoria School site on Dillon. I am 100% against the application. I grew up in this town and moved away to live and work in New York. I came home because I missed the small town atmosphere of Tecumseh. I bought a house on Arlington just around the corner from what is now known as St. Andre's Grade School. I have been following the issue of Briday's development application for the old Vic School site in the neighboring part of town, and I'm very worried. The small town atmosphere of Tecumseh is being threatened. If council allows this ill-advised, non-compliant, crowded, and irrevocably ugly development on Dillon, it will, without question, ruin that neighborhood. And then, what is to prevent future developers from swooping in and doing the exact same to my neighborhood when the school board decides it no longer wants the St. Andre School, or A.V. Graham, or D. Eagle, St. Marguerite de Ville, St. Antoine, St. Pius? Our official plan says in section 2.11b that an overriding goal is to maintain and improve the quality of life for the residents by preserving the existing small town atmosphere. That's why we all live here, to live in a small town. This is not the place for Briday's 3-story walk-up stacked townhomes and narrow attached townhomes. These designs are for the cramped and crowded cities like Toronto. Briday's arrogant and unfounded assertion that Area 1 of this town has no established overall character and no characteristics that are defining or significant is extraordinarily insulting, and Briday and its planners should be ashamed. Our town planners should also be ashamed because they agree with the findings. This town and Area 1 in particular are exactly what a small town should be, and how dare a developer denigrate us to further his own motives. And in case the town planners have forgotten, Area 1 is precisely what the town founders wanted and insisted on through the years via our town's official plan. Briday is demanding an official plan amendment, a zoning amendment, and then setback variances within his development. We are all well aware that his development is non-compliant with our official plan in height, density, scale, and massing. This proposed medium density development fronts on a local road, and the Tecumseh official plan forbids this. It is not compatible with the neighborhood, no matter how many times Briday and our town planners say otherwise. It's not a good candidate for this the property is not a good candidate for this over intensification because of lack of parkland in Area 1. New development should respect the local context and contribute to it in a positive way. Mr. Jeffrey said that in his residential intensification report. Briday's plan does not do that in the slightest. Council should not support density at all costs when the end result damages the neighborhood. According to the Ontario Planning for Intensification paper, each community's form and level of intensification will differ based on their specific characteristics, such as location, history, community strengths, and preferences. Well, it is our stated preference that we do not want all the intensification that Briday is proposing. Mr. Mayor and Council, I'm asking that you listen to us. Please do not give approval for this development. It doesn't fit, and it will be the downfall of Area 1. Then the insidious creeping effect of poor land use planning decisions will spread to other areas of the town. Pretty soon we will all suffer its effects, not just Area 1. It is Council's job to protect the current and future residents of the town from bad planning and self-serving proposals from developers. Please protect the town and all the neighborhoods. Thank you, Connor William Tino.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Tino. If could you make sure that for the record that we have Connor's letter in the hands of the clerk's office at some point?
Yes, certainly. I'll be glad to do that. That was my intention.
Thank you very much. Okay. Next is Briday Boygan, resident.
Hi there. Can I be heard okay?
Yep.
Okay. So thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council for listening to our community's concerns today. I just want to put on record that I do support Tamara Tino's and Connor Tino's concerns as well, but I won't reiterate that. I also spoke at the last public meeting in regards to the initial proposal, and I'm sure all in attendance can remember a gentleman that was there that requested the mayor allow a straw poll for those in support or against the proposal. This resulted in an unquestionable display of opposition, not to the development, but specifically the proposal, and this revised proposal is no different. I recall one of our councillors following the meeting saying that they hadn't seen such a crowd at a public meeting. I'm sure this was one, if not the largest attendance at a public meeting in regards to a property proposal. I spoke at the last meeting in regards to how this development doesn't accommodate and support our baby boomers who have retired or are soon to be. How will this support our seniors and aging population? How will this support those with disabilities, special needs, and mobility issues? How will this support our growing community and young families? It's simple, it won't. The developer has been quoted saying this development is 90% accessible. How? If I understand correctly, the 3-story townhomes each have 8 ground units, which I'm sure are available for anyone to buy. Where does this leave these residents? The developer also quoted 2-story townhomes are for an elevator option. I didn't see this in the revised plan. This is nothing more but a statement with no merit. So this leaves us at, from my calculation anyway, 25% accessibility. The developer has stated our neighborhood has no character to comply with. This is the heart of Tecumseh, the oldest neighborhood. Some of the surrounding streets are even named after previous councillors and one of our previous mayors. There's history here with an abundance of character and charm. I caution the few people who are in support of this revised proposal. The developer has continuously not met proper timelines and has not followed proper protocol. After the demolition, the remains of the school, a large pile of rubble, was left for 6 months. The grass was left to get knee-high, both notably increasing the amount of vermin and rodents activity in our neighborhood. Additionally, on the posted sale of the Victoria School, it stated the building contained the deadly carcinogen asbestos. Excuse me. A concerned neighbor called the Ministry of Labor, who had no record of proper asbestos removal at this Victoria School property. So was this just left for our families, children, grandparents, and pets to inhale? What should we expect with this development when there's already so many neglectful acts by the developer? My hope is that council, the town of Tecumseh, the developer, will listen to the residents of Tecumseh and respect the community's concern. I'm afraid not doing so will lay an ugly framework for any upcoming developments in this town. We can't put increasing density, greed, profit, and capitalization over our Tecumseh residents and our families. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Okay. All right, our next delegation is Mr. Tony Tino, resident.
Okay, Mr. Mayor and Council, I'm glad to have an opportunity to address you this evening. I want to thank the 4 members of council who took the time to come to my house and listen to my concerns along with my neighbors. We have been disappointed with Mr. Yablansky and his company, Briday, throughout this entire process. First, Mr. Yablansky proposed a 6-story building that was simply a warning shot across the bow to check if we were awake. Well, we were. And that's when the fear of this proposal started to sink in. Then, in a purposeful attempt to look reasonable and attentive to the community concerns, Briday filed a formal application with 63 units, still way too many for this neighborhood. And overall, his application simply doesn't comply with our official plan. Every time Mr. Yablansky comes around to council with one of his development applications, he asks for, among other things, changes to the official plan, zoning bylaw changes, variances to yard setbacks. The only reason a developer does this is not to enhance the neighborhood or benefit the existing community or to try to fit in, but rather to make as much money as possible. Briday is used to getting everything it wants from town council and hoping this time is no different. Why can't he just follow the rules like the rest of us? My family has lived here for generations and contributed to the town in more ways than you can count. And do not disrespect me and my family and everyone else in this town by saying there is no character, anything worth noticing, or any benchmark worth striving for. This is the oldest planned single-family residential neighborhood, generous lot sizes, and a variety of welcoming styles that don't look like shipping container units Briday is promoting. We have style, Mr. Yablansky. Your proposal, I'm afraid, does not. We were here first. If you want to build something, you have to fit in with the rest of us. Mr. Yablansky said in the media that he has addressed many of the neighborhood's concerns. He has not. He is still non-compliant with our official plan. The density is too great for the location. The height of the 3-story stacked townhomes exceeds our official plan. The scale is not consistent with the neighborhood, and there is still a real fear of more flooding from Briday's amended proposal. Plus, residents complained about the overcrowded aspect, and yet Briday's amended plan now adds a parking garage to the already too crowded layout. Last page. Mr. Yablansky also states in terms of unit design, his plan reflects what the market is demanding. No one I know is demanding 3-story walk-ups. No one is demanding more stairs. In fact, according to articles in the newspaper quoting the region's Realtor Association, the most popular type of housing in Windsor and Essex County is the 1-story semi-detached townhomes. That boils down to 16 units out of the 63 that will be for seniors and folks with disability issues. Mr. Yablansky also says that when we see the finished product, we will like it. I doubt it, because so far we have only seen this wide-angle drawings of proposed project deliberately done to show everything as an expansive, roomy, and in the best possible light. And we already don't like it. The pictures don't give the proper proportions. It is very doubtful we will like the cramped, crowded, overwhelming reality of your proposal. But what we have seen is the overcrowded density in the villages of Riverside. Your project has a greater density than those villages, and it just won't fly here. I am asking the town to follow its own mandate from its urban design discussion paper that says to successfully incorporate new development through intensification in Tecumseh, urban design should respect the local context and consider the benefits to the existing community. Briday's proposal does not respect our community and does not offer any benefits. Mr. Mayor and Council, you represent us, and the overwhelming majority are against this proposal. We are simply asking you to protect us from this application that has no place in our neighborhood. The over 1,500 people in Ward 1 deserve better, and it wouldn't be hard to get there with the cooperation of all parties concerned. Let's find a compromise. I'm sure we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tino. Next is Mr. Mike Huxell, resident. Mr. Huxell?
Oh, how about now? Can you hear me?
There we go.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No problem.
I'm asking council, is this what you had in mind when you developed the town's official plan for infill and intensification? I'd be disappointed to learn that the proposal brought forward by Briday is what town officials I voted for would approve. In my opinion, this proposal is not how you keep the town's heritage. I'm sure my neighbors would agree with this statement I'm about to make. We're not against developing vacant Dillon property. We want it developed with class, taste, and the type of housing that is suitable for the neighborhood. This neighborhood has had new homes built in the last 5 years. Older homes were demolished and new homes were built to replace them. The homes that were built with taste and proportion to its surroundings. Briday brings up points and quotes from the town's proposal, but they also leave out some key points. An example, in the town's official plan, 3.3.8, in the town of Tecumseh, council will encourage both public and private sector landowners, developers, and builders to undertake small-scale infilling type residential intensification activities that make the most efficient, cost-effective use of existing municipal infrastructure and services. Infilling means the residential development of similar scale, density, and use of vacant lots, undeveloped land, built up area of the municipality to create additional dwelling units. When reviewing individual requests for residential intensification initiatives, council will have regard to the following: height, size, and density of the new dwellings units and compatibility of such units with the surrounding neighborhood. The current neighborhood is mostly of a zone of an R1 and an R2, which are single dwelling detached homes. The max allowable height, it's 10.6 meters or 34.9 feet. They have their 3-story buildings are exceeding that maximum height of 9 foot 5 inches. Each level of their plan is 10 foot 6 inches. This is only 1 foot 1 inch from being an entire level over the max limit. Grading. When reviewing the grading map, it presents elevation for the proposed plan that would appear the ground level of the interior plan is 3 to 4 feet higher than the surrounding properties. The proposed property is always flooded as it is. The south end of the property would appear to have only one storm catch basin. I asked the town, how can this be accepted? Where's the courtesy for the existing residents? They talk about the pond and how it's going to be an open, dry pond. There's nothing that's dry about the property behind us as it sits right now. If you were to go behind us right now, you'll see there's probably about 100 to 200 feet of standing water. Every year there's standing water. The majority of the time throughout the summer, whenever there's heavy rains, standing water is there for prolonged times. And then let's talk about the consistency of maintaining the bylaws and regulations. I have a fence on each side of my yard. One side I had two sections of the fence that exceeded the max height of 6'2" by 4 inches. the town made me fix that. No problem, because it was not in compliance with the bylaw. On the other side of the fence, my neighbor and I, we decided to put up an 18-inch privacy lattice on the top of the fence because we both have pools and we wanted our privacy. It was something that was both agreed. We were forced to take that down because it didn't comply with the town's bylaws. It's been noted in Briday's proposal that the residents have brought forward to the, or sorry, it's been noted in the town's proposal that aging residents have brought forward consideration for smaller dwellings with easy accessible right-of-ways. It would appear that Briday's response to this problem would be to put multi-level homes in the middle of the neighborhood, predominantly comprised of 1 to 1.5 story single detached homes. Do they really believe they meant accessible by location or ease of access from a physical sense? I know that Briday will argue that they bring unique style of housing to the area. They will say that they will cater to the aging population. Is this a survey? Is there a survey that proves that people over 60 that could afford those ground units would want to live in those units that have 2 stories above them? So they also state that the school was inspiration. The only thing that's inspirational from the school to that, what they're proposing is the color of the brick. The school, it wasn't 3 stories, it was 1. The addition that was put onto the school, it was 1. That's all we ask. We would like everybody to try and come together, come up with a conclusion that satisfies all parties, because we are in favor of developing that property, but please just do it with taste and class. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Huxell. I believe our next delegation is Anne Marie Huxell, but being represented by Ms. Tino.
Hello, I'm just getting my paper from Ms. Huxell. Here we go. Dear Mr. Mayor and councillors, I am writing because I'm very concerned with the proposed development by Briday for the old school property on Dillon. It's right behind my house and I will be directly affected by it. This proposal doesn't fit here, not in size or crowdedness, height or character. It looks like it belongs on Tecumseh Road with all the other condo and apartment buildings. That would make more sense. Or it would make more sense if it was in the Lakewood Park South subdivision near the 4-story and 5-story condos. When Mr. Ublansky put that subdivision in, he should have put his 3-story stacked townhomes next to them, but he did not. This is a single family home neighborhood. We all moved here knowing that. We have complied with the rules. It is my opinion that the developer is asking for everything, all in the name of profit. The mayor is always talking about how this town needs housing for seniors, and I know that our population demographics show that seniors are a large cohort and getting larger. This development does nothing to help seniors. This housing design looks like a cheap rental unit neighborhood with no sense of permanence or place. I think a development of houses or semi-attached 1-story townhomes would fit in perfectly on the old school property. I am aware that the 1-story townhomes in Lakeshore have a base price of $720,000. I am sure Briday could make a nice profit off of those numbers. In this neighborhood, we live in a floodplain. We've had floods. This overly large development won't help us with that. It doesn't matter what their engineering experts say. I'm worried because Briday says it will elevate its own lands, which means water will go on all the neighboring properties. I know that Harrow is building a development of 72 units on a piece of property more than double the size of Briday's property. Briday wants to put 63 units in, and his property is less than half the size of the property in Harrow, 72 to 63. Finally, I thought that Briday was supposed to have listened to all our concerns from the first meeting. It appears from its addendum to the planning report that it has not. But they did manage to mention that there's nothing special about this area, no character, nothing. My question is, if that's the case, why do they want to build here? Oh, I know, profit. Thank you, Anne Marie Huxell.
And thank you very much, Ms. Tino. Next, we have Barbara Cole, resident.
Good evening, everyone. From the beginning of this eye-opening and disheartening process, my husband and I have realized that despite Briday's promised amendments to address the neighborhood concerns regarding density, height, style, and flooding, that modifications have basically been non-existent. Not only has there been little to no change to their plan, but during the course of them owning this parcel of land, the developers have proven time and time again that they have no pride of ownership and little to no regard for our neighborhood and its residents. At our first meeting with the developer, they proposed a 6-story building, which now we see was a ploy to make us perceive that their next submission was a huge change to satisfy all of the opposing individuals. This latest proposal, which consists of 3-story, 2-story, and a parking garage, totally changes the character and the landscape of our long-standing and established community. Our neighborhood does have distinct character, despite Briday's disclaimer. Our neighborhood has charm, nostalgia, and mainly consists of 1- and 2-story single-family dwellings. By changing the zoning to accommodate this proposal, they are changing our neighborhood. When looking at the design of the 3-story stacked condos, we question not only the height, but what kind of ownership will that type of building attract? Who wants to climb or could climb 3 stories with groceries, furniture, luggage, children's strollers, or simply after a hard day's work? This style of building is very limited to potential buyers and non-conducive to senior living or individuals with disabilities or in poor health, nor are the 2 stories for that matter. There is very limited single-story units being offered, which is not compatible for our aging population in this area. Given the limited potential buyers for 3-story stacked condo, this development will attract transient tenants and absentee landlords. This style of building does not fit in our community, and we, the neighborhood, will be left to become the eyesore of Tecumseh. The developer is cramming in as many units as possible for the sake of greater profitability. I'm all for making money, but gouging at the expense of innocent people indicates a lack of integrity and concern. The town is obligated to intensify these types of properties, but there is no mandate that it has to be increased to the numbers and styles currently proposed. Again, changing an area in a neighborhood to suit their need rather than staying in line with our current landscape. And then there is the plan to build a linear multi-garage building. Again, not worthy of our neighborhood. If you want a storage garage, put it on Tecumseh Road, along with other comparable storage properties like Access Storage or Storage Mart. We questioned Briday's visions to turn our established neighborhood with distinct character into something you would find in a high traffic and busy area. Then we have the flooding issue. Although we know that the subject property will have its own water retention system, we also know that the land is going to be raised substantially higher than the existing abutting properties. There will still be runoff to the surrounding areas. The current infrastructure is already overburdened, and the town must take action to remedy this situation as quickly as possible. This expansion will only add havoc to the current problem. Lastly, I would like to address Briday's blatant lack of concern for the area and people. When the school was torn down, piles of rubble were left for months on end unattended. I may as well have been looking at a dump. Then, when the piles were removed, the base of the building was left with exposed asbestos with airborne capabilities. Eventually, the remainder of the building was removed, but with backhoes and with no apparent abatement teams or care. This may have negative impact by such a negligent failing to act on such a serious matter. We also had to deal with the grass not being cut when it was well beyond an acceptable length. I had mature trees on our property, on our side of the fence, that were cut down by an encroaching contractor that was hired by Briday without my knowledge or permission. These trees were at least 15 feet tall and provided a wall of green privacy. From my knowledge, other abutting neighbors suffered the same disservice. The developer also missed deadlines for cleanup permits. How are we supposed to have faith when there have been many instances of negligence? Is past performance indicative of what we are going to have to deal with in the future? Are we dealing with a developer that wants to ask for forgiveness rather than permission? Our confidence in Briday's ability or intent to indeed have our backs has been completely eroded by past actions, broken deadlines, and assurances, and their lack to envision our neighborhood as having character. Lastly, our ask is that the developer and councillors view this project as if it was in their backyard. Does it fit, or is this a misfit? We need this to be a win-win situation for everybody. We ask for consideration to maintain our family-based small town feeling and with comfort of privacy. We need to find a compromise that allows acceptable profitability for the developer as well. Our solution would never be to include 3-story structures and linear garage buildings, but to make a purchase attractive for all walks of life, which complements our present type of local housing within this immediate area and contributes to maintaining our current character of a friendly, progressive, small town community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cole. All right, next is again, Ms. Tino, agent for Mike and Renee McCann.
Hello again. The McCanns have entrusted me to read their concerns. They live on Dillon Drive across from the proposed development. Being longtime Tecumseh residents since 1992, we are deeply concerned on many fronts. First, the infrastructure concerns. We are situated on Dillon, where the ground literally has slumped down, causing massive flooding, resulting in major damages over the years. Next, we have raised 3 daughters on a very quiet and safe strip of road. This plan will create major chaos and congestion with too many vehicles coming and going all hours in the day and the night, headlights straight into our living room, everything like that. Dillon is a local residential street with lots of foot traffic. Dillon is not a connector road. Dillon is not an arterial road. Dillon is a local road, and medium density doesn't belong here. The scope of this project does not fit our neighborhood. Parking garages, really, they look like storage lockers. We definitely say no to 3-story buildings. We say fewer number of units, especially for the size of the property that there is. It's not that big. I refer to Harrow's new subdivision, which is double the size of property compared to Victoria's School property. Harrow is only building 72 units, where Briday wants to build 63 on less than half. Seriously, Briday is not improving our neighborhood or even considering our best interests. This design does not work, and we find it unacceptable. Please consider a nice cul-de-sac behind Dillon with lovely homes or single-story townhomes. Regards from the McCanns. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Next, we have Aranka Hawken, also resident.
Okay. Like, right, hello. Mayor McNamara, can you see me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, okay. Good evening, your worship and council members.
Good evening.
Tecumseh is a unique town. It has many hidden gems and unique neighborhood niches. They are not found in today's modern developments. These treasures must always be preserved and not taken for granted. The Victoria School development is one of those niches, a quiet, safe family area. Having lived on Coronado for 10 years and taking care of my 4 grandchildren before and after school, I can attest that it was a wonderful upbringing for them. I now live in the Village Grove complex. Regarding the development first, yes, they need more housing, but having 63 units spilling onto Dillon would become a traffic nightmare. I am sure that the provincial town density requirements have been satisfied by the 3 new apartment buildings currently being built in Tecumseh. The proposed 3-story walk-up design is not empty nest friendly. The suggestion of installing elevators, and from what I saw in the newspaper, it said only for the 2-story, would be cost prohibitive to the majority of buyers. This is an area of single family homes, and as such must remain so. Another mention in the article in the paper today was a privacy fence. A privacy fence, I may be wrong about this, but I think it's a 6-foot limit, would not afford the neighbors their privacy. Developments like this also elevate the land, which leads to runoff off the water, and this will find its way onto the neighboring lands. We all know that water will go and find its own source. The design plan resembles subsidized housing. A smaller, more reasonable development must be made where families can move into our town, and this requires a green space and trees. We must be careful that the existing homes do not lose their value. The second issue is flooding. As we know, Tecumseh is in a floodplain. The flooding of properties has been a constant heavy worry, as well as a substantial financial burden. This plan ensures major flooding. I recall St. Pierre Street in 2018 had 4 feet of water due to the flooding. That is adjacent to this property. A few months ago, there was a severe flood threat to the areas of Tecumseh and Lakeshore. It was so serious, they delivered information to residents who would be affected. We were directed to 2 apps that would assist us when flooding occurred. One was floodontario.ca and the other was Accurate Weather Tecumseh, Ontario. Because the present threat is deemed minimal, suddenly the issues have been put on the back burner. The town, being well aware of the situation, submitted a request on November 20th, 2020 to both the provincial and federal governments for a grant of $210,000, a thorough investment in Canada's infrastructure to purchase a high water rescue vehicle, which I understand would help the fire department rescue residents. It is basically a truck, but high enough to get through the deepest water which Tecumseh has reached. Looking at the precautions the administration has taken seals the deal, sorry about that. Too dense a development and we will have another flood. IRCA, unfortunately, I don't know where they stand, but I trust that they will stand with the residents. In conclusion, we all have seen the fiasco on Amy Croft. Tecumseh residents do not deserve this. I thank your worship and the council members for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Hawken, for your comments. Now call upon Mr. Michael Brennan, resident.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Mr. Ublansky. Most of my points have already been made, so I'm not going to repeat them. I'll start with a question. The fence that is surrounding the development, is it a solid fence or is a Lundy type of mesh fence? A chain link fence. Has that been decided? What do we got?
Mr. Mayor?
Yep, go ahead.
I can speak on this briefly, and Mr. Ublansky may want to add something. That type of detail has not been resolved definitively. It has become the town's practice recently to require vinyl in place of wood for these types of situations because of long-term durability. But that would typically get resolved through a further stage of site plan approval if this development actually proceeds. Mr. Ublansky may want to clarify something that would be the typical approach taken by the town.
Brian, I think, hi Brian. No, I think that's very fair what you said. I think that will be done through the process of if we get to the stage for the site plan agreement. So Nothing has been decided with how the fencing will happen after this part of the process is completed. Does that answer?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I live on Lacoste. I've lived here since 1991. So I guess I've got roots, and I guess this actually impacts on me to a large degree, historically and presently. I have a suggestion. I don't know if it's been considered, but is there the possibility of along McCall Street putting in additional trees that would allow for added privacy? In particular, yeah, for the people who are backing onto the present McCall.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, once again, that certainly is something that will be looked at. I think we had referred earlier in our presentation that those types of site design details will certainly be looked at through the site plan process. That is absolutely an alternative to look at, and I think I made mention of landscape treatments, and that would be typically done through the site plan process where there's a detailed design done and an agreement established with the municipality.
Thank you, Mr. Hillman. In regards to the residential intensification, at present, it's an empty lot, so 2 homes would qualify as being more residentially intense. So I don't think that the issue is the homes, it's the number of homes that are going in there. And I speak in favor of a development that enhances the neighborhood rather than detracts from it. In terms of this neighborhood not having any character, I think that a development like the Lakewood Crescent townhomes that Mr. Yablansky has built would enhance the neighborhood and give it some character. I would speak against 3-story buildings. They're not being disguised by a 1-story parking garage and 2-story homes. The presently this area is 1-story. If you put in a 2-story building on that property, well, that's already something that's higher, and all you're doing is disguising a 3-story building. I also speak against a definition of stacked townhouses by council. Everything else that I have had to say has been said by others. I won't repeat it. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your consideration to this. And according to the report, there will be no issue of flooding coming into our backyards. So I'm taking you at your word for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brennan, for your comments. All right, our next delegation is Mr. Christopher Toldo from Royal LePage Binder Real Estate.
Hello. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members, members of the community. My name is Christopher Toldo. I'm addressing council tonight as a former 31-year resident of the town of Tecumseh, current owner and former resident of a unit in one of Tecumseh's medium density developments, and a local realtor. I want to provide my unique insight on why this development should and needs to move forward. I grew up right around the corner from the former Victoria School site. This area was able to provide a wonderful childhood experience for me. Great friends, good schools, and plenty of parks to pick from. One day, if I am lucky enough to have kids, I would love to provide that same experience to my kids as I once had. When it was the right time for me to leave the nest, I ended up purchasing a unit at 250 Manning, 5-story building that pairs with another building within the community. It's everything I needed to match my busy lifestyle. It's a great area surrounded by a diverse mix of individuals, couples, and families just living life. My neighbor was an empty nester, an empty nest couple that moved into the condo to have a low maintenance place to call home in the summer, not have to worry about when they were gone in the winter. I have kept that unit to have my mom live there when she's ready to downsize. And if my mom is listening right now, no pressure. Fast forward to today, where I currently reside with my girlfriend in Riverside. Tecumseh was choice number one, but we couldn't find that next home that could support our next goals in life. Finding that family home in Tecumseh is proving to be harder and harder as less empty nesters are inclined to leave their homes and move into that next step due to a lack of transitional options. Currently, as of today, there are 11 active listings within the whole municipality of Tecumseh on the MLS. And I know for a fact that one of those has already sold, so it's actually 10. If you live in Tecumseh or grew up in Tecumseh, you know more than anyone, you want to stay in Tecumseh. We need more options within the town so our past, present, and future can continue to experience this great town. As many of you are aware, Windsor-Essex County is experiencing a real estate boom, as is much of Ontario. I can speak from firsthand experience as a local realtor that the housing crisis is real. There are so many people in need of housing that we literally cannot build it quick enough. Within the last 5 years, Ontario has welcomed over 1 million residents, and many people did not think that those people needed housing. Fast forward to a post-COVID-19 world where working remotely is becoming more common. Gasoline was poured onto the fire, and the need for housing has spread into nearly every community within Ontario. It is the norm now for our market to see 10 to 30 offers on one house. Remember, for every house sold, if there are 30 offers, 29 people are still looking for homes. This kind of demand does not get absorbed within a year. Without these medium density developments, the demand will grow, making it next to impossible for future generations to experience and enjoy homeownership. I conclude with this. As a 31-year resident of the town of Tecumseh, I hope we promote more of this kind of development so more people can experience the great community we have already built. As a past resident and current owner of a medium density unit, I hope we continue to build these medium density developments for stronger and more diverse communities. And as a local realtor, I hope we see more of these type of developments, because if we don't, the dream of home ownership within this area could be lost for future generations. Thank you for listening to me. Have a great night.
Thank you very much, Mr. Toldo, for your comments. Next, I call upon Ron and Lori McConnell, also residents of Tecumseh.
Say hi, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Can you hear me, Gary?
Loud and clear.
Okay, good, good. My submissions are included as communication 7, and I won't bore everybody with reading both of those emails, but I would encourage members of council to read them both. The first one was September 3rd, 2019, where I talked about a number of concerns regarding the infrastructure and the development itself. None of those concerns that I talked about seem to have been addressed in this latest proposal. And my latest presentation on March 24th to Ms. Moy that you all have, I hope you could take a look at that. And again, it talks about the concerns with flooding and the 3-story building not consistent with the area. I could go on, but I agree and wholeheartedly agree and endorse with Tamara's comments, Connor's comments, Tony's comments, Briday, I hope I don't mess this up, Boheen, the Hutzels, Coles, and McCanns. Everything they've said is consistent with what I've submitted in the past. In addition to that, on March 19th, I sent a quick little email to Brian Just maybe I'll read that to get it in the record. Has the town given any further consideration to the existing infrastructure needs of those of us residing on Dillon Drive, particularly the substandard deteriorating roadway that needs lowering as it's currently higher than our properties? And I'm kind of troubled to hear that the development is going to be 4 feet higher, as we already have a development that was put in the 80s. We've been living here since 1982.
39 years.
That is 4 feet higher than our property. And ever since that was built, my garage and my backyard gets flooded on any substantial rain. So I can't even imagine if I got it coming both ways. The people on this side of Dillon Drive will be at the lowest point probably in the whole town of Tecumseh. I go on to say here, in the replacement with curb gutters and proper storm drainage. Also, both the storm and sanitary sewers must be over 70 years old and probably need upgrading with or without the proposed development, as evidenced by the recent required replacement of all of our gas lines that were leaking. Finally, it looks like I will have a stormwater detention pond across the street from my property. As we know, these usually become unsightly, weed-infested mosquito and rodent breeding grounds before too long. I believe in Windsor, they have constructed a number of encapsulated retention ponds recently covered with grass and landscaping, which would reduce and maybe eliminate the aforementioned nuisance factors and create added usable green space and make the park, the proposed parkland a little bit bigger, I would think. Also, can the town, just a quick aside, can the town give any assurance that the ridiculous 128 mailboxes in front of my house won't become 180 when the development is completed? So that's my email to Brian recently. I haven't heard back on that. And again, I don't want to bore everybody with all my comments on these emails, but you know, I've said that we have continuing concerns regarding the roadways. Mr. McCann talked about that in his email. And the 3-story walk-ups are certainly not consistent with this area, and the zoning amendment should not be endorsed by council. In conclusion, I hope council will duly consider all input received tonight and arrive at a conclusion that respects those of us who have lived and supported the community for many, many years, and encourage the developer to meet with the adjacent property owners and come up with a proposal that we can all support and be a complement, not a blight to the neighborhood. My wife said, oh, yeah, that's it, Gary. That's what I want to add tonight.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McConnell, for your, obviously your comments. Okay, we'll move on to Scott Innocenti or Innocenti.
Mr. Mayor, I think he went beginning right after an individual said all of his points were made up, I believe.
Okay, then if I may, if we could just take for a health break 5 minutes, and it is, I've got 7:49. It's 7:55. We can reconvene in about 6 minutes. And on deck would be Mr. Richard Rivard.
Mr. Innocente, I see that you've re-entered the meeting.
Yep. Hi, can you hear me?
I can. We're just on a 5-minute break, so I will let the mayor pause to take just so the group here can have a personal break. But I just want to let you know that we will resume at 7:55, and I will let him know that you've rejoined the meeting.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Your worship, if I may.
Yep.
Mr. Innocente has rejoined the meeting.
Oh, okay. So I'll bring him on as And then we'll just ask Mr. Rivard just to stay on deck. Okay, so all the counselors are back. I'm hoping. Okay. Thank you, sir. All right, Mr. I think it'll be Scott Inocente. I know you're, I'm going to ask you to come on board. There you are.
Yeah, hi guys. Oh shoot. Okay, so thanks for having me on. My computer is about to die, so I'm gonna have to make this pretty quick. But sorry about the delay as well. So just a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Tecumseh. Went to school in Tecumseh, so I'm very familiar with the area. I'm also very familiar with the project. And I wanted to touch on just my angle as a local real estate agent. And we're all aware of what's happening in Ontario. It's a housing crisis. I have clients right now that are desperately looking for housing in Tecumseh. And basically when they say that, I reply, good luck, right? There's just not enough supply. I know this project is a little bit denser than probably local residents like, and I understand that, but building single family homes or big 2 stories or whatever else it's not going to do it. You need dense projects. It's the only thing that's going to work. Everything else is a drop in the bucket. It really is desperate times for people out there, and we have to start thinking of the next generations coming up and building that necessary supply for them. So the housing crisis is real. Myself, Chris Toldo, we're out there every day dealing with it. So that's just kind of the input that I wanted to bring in there.
Well, thank you, Mr. Inocente. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, next I'd call upon Mr. Rivard. Richard.
Good evening, everyone. Your Worship, Mayor McNamara, and members of the Town Council. My name is Dick Rivard, and I'd like to speak in favor of the Victoria by the Lake development. I, along with my wife Margaret and 3 children, moved into our home in Tecumseh in September 1986. We live between L'Esperance Road and Berry Street, very close to the Victoria School property. Over the past 35 years, we have fallen in love with our adopted old Tecumseh neighborhood, with its winding streets, distinctive homes, and century-old trees. Each day as I do my daily walk, I am so thankful for the beauty and the peacefulness that surrounds me. When I first learned that Briday Incorporated had purchased the Victoria School property with the idea to develop multiple condominiums and townhouses on the site, and after we had seen the plans, Margaret and I were very pleased to know that one day we would now have the option to downsize from our current home and move into the Victoria by the Lake development and remain in this beautiful old Tecumseh neighborhood. Having witnessed the high standard of design and build that Briday Incorporated achieved with the Estates of Lakewood Homes development, as well as the back row of the homes of Christie Lane, I have no doubt that when completed, this property will greatly enhance the beauty and the integrity of this surrounding neighborhood and become the next jewel in the crown of the town of Tecumseh. Thank you for your time. Respectfully submitted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rivard. All right, I'd like to call upon Mr. Ryan Hill.
Good evening. I'll be as brief as possible. I'm speaking obviously for the development. A couple areas I'd like to touch on. The opposition that I heard today. I've been in some heated debates on social media with some individuals that border the property. I've heard things tonight like subsidized housing, riverside villages, slums. There was one individual that just moved to Tecumseh and indicated that the crime rate was going to go up once this development was built. This is fear, this is change, and I understand that, I get that. When things change, when you've been living somewhere for so long, people don't like change. And I listened to Mr. and Mrs. Tino, and it seems like they have a sentiment of not really building in my backyard, and I get that. I was a vocal opponent to the Lakewood development. I've known Mr. Ublansky for 15, 20 years. And I grew up playing Lakewood. I thought it was a bad idea. I had friends, family members that lived within 400 yards of the development. I thought it was just bad. I thought there's gonna be issues with traffic. Everything that I've heard today as it relates to the opposition, I thought the same thing at Lakewood. I saw what they were doing. Once they started construction, I bought a lot. I now live there. So I can attest to the quality of the development that he's done, because my family, my 3 children, and my wife have lived there for the last 4 years. I've heard a lot of people address flooding concerns, and I'm going to defer to the experts, and I think I'd ask town council to do the same thing. I'm an attorney by trade. I'm not an engineer. And I think I heard things from the city today of compatibility. And I would just ask that the town council defer to the professionals as it relates to those issues, because it seems like it does fit within certain parameters. I grew up in Lakeshore in a rural area with my parents. They're still in that same home that I grew up on West Pike Creek. Went to E.B. Graham, went to DM Eagle. The one thing that my parents want to do is they want to come to Tecumseh. And I think a lot of the realtors address these concerns of buying in Tecumseh. It's virtually impossible. My father, when he found out about Mr. Ublansky's development, he doesn't want to cut his 1.5 acres of grass anymore. And the one thing that really appealed to them when they finally downsize is that condo association that takes care of the maintenance. That was a huge plus for them. They like to travel, they want to travel, but they have massive upkeep, and they don't want to keep on doing that. I've been looking to get my parents in Tecumseh for the last 4 years with absolutely zero luck, unless they want another yard and other things to take care of. So I think this plan would be perfect for them and other seniors. I don't agree with some of the opposition talking about people getting up there then looking to downsize. It wouldn't be compatible. I think it would. And I don't see anything coming in the pike as it relates to other condo developments like this, where there is a condo association that's going to be taking care of all the basic maintenance. I think that's brilliant. One thing that Ms. Tino said, she kept on using the word we, and I know she had a lot of proxies and stuff like that, and I appreciate what she's done in terms of the surrounding owners. But one thing I want council to be aware of is, because I have been on social media, and I know Councillor Dowley's done a great job mediating some of the debates. I want council to be aware that there's a lot of homeowners that actually own property bordering this development that want units. And a lot of them aren't going to be here today. They don't want to be vocal because they're scared to speak out. They're scared to speak out in terms of for the development. And when I get these messages on social media, I would forward them to Mr. Ublansky. But I've had a lot of people that have actually reached out that border this development that want to be in that development. So I just want the council to be aware that it's not every single individual that owns a piece of property that's surrounding this area as opposed to it. It's not true at all. And I think that's it. That's all I have. I appreciate you letting me speak.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hill. Next, we have, I apologize already for the pronunciation, but is it Mark Makaj, resident?
That's it.
It's Mark Merkel, but that's close enough.
Okay.
Because my wife is here with me, Sharon. So thanks for having us today. We just want to share that we're against the proposal, pretty much 100%. We do have a very quiet neighborhood. We moved in here about 10 years ago, and we've enjoyed the neighborhood 100%. It's a very quiet neighborhood. My background is that I am in the construction and planning industry. We own a local business in the area too. ACM Panelworks is a successful building envelope company, and we've been involved with projects really all over the globe, both from planning stages right through to completion in all different types of projects. So I do come from a background that I can understand. And unfortunately, I only have 5 minutes, but I really think that kind of the wool's been pulled over a lot of the planners' eyes over here of the type of development and the intensity of what's going on here, how unsuited it is for our neighborhood. the purchase of the McCall lands, and if you look at the site plan, that is really the only green amenity space that's there. And that is simply being mathematically used to try and justify the intensity of the amount of units that are being used here. If you really look at the site plan, there is little to no green space on the heart of the plan. When you look at the 3-story building in the center, you look at the 3-story building at the park, and then the 2 stories that encroach around it, there's little to no green space in that entire area. What you're going to end up with is the backyards of the 3-story town looking towards the 2 stories. That's going to become people's backyards. They're going to have their barbecues and their parties. You're going to need some type of fence there. This will be nothing but parking lots and fences and cars scattered within the heart of this neighborhood. I feel bad for the people that would buy something in the neighborhood. You know, at the very least, we have green space around it. And I think that was being created just to appease the neighborhood. But guys, look at the development itself. It's horrible. It's an actual horror. There's no place for snow when we get large snowfalls. We have a garbage container. There's nothing but a tarred area at the front door of the 3-story town to the parking garage. The parking garage will be a complete eyesore on the backyards of the neighbors that we have behind us. Somebody's pulled the wool over somebody's eyes, because it's really being felt here that we're being sold this development by the administration with Mr. Hillman's comments this morning. And I've been involved in a lot of these types of projects, and this is very poorly done. And the problem is there's no reason for it, right? As we've already heard, there's plenty of land for Tecumseh to develop on. There's no reason for this intensified development to happen in the middle of our neighborhood. And just as, you know, the couple of real estate agents that said, yeah, there's a uniqueness about our neighborhood. Yeah, there's only 10 houses for sale. This neighborhood is unique. It's quiet. People are walking here. This would destroy our neighborhood. I'm sorry. And the other part that we want to go to there is I'm very concerned about a couple of other things we heard, that the stormwater pond would just be a dry pond, which is always a mess. Those shouldn't even be allowed anymore. It has to be an underground retainage, because dry ponds are just mosquito infested. Listen, even to the part where and a lot of people have mentioned the mailboxes, guys, that's been unsafe. I don't know how administration allowed that. I haven't been by to complain yet, but our daughter is visually impaired. Our home is a accessible home. We could no longer walk her to the left side of our house because we constantly have people coming to the mailboxes. We've already had 2 or 3 occasions where we weren't almost hit, but hey, a car's coming to park. They don't see us. We're on the sidewalk. There's nothing there. We can't allow her to walk there. And now if we're going to have a dry pond and more intensified traffic coming through here, we might as well, I can't walk to the left side of our house anymore. And I don't even want to start with the poor people that are right across the single entry. They're going to have headlights in their house repeatedly day after day. Now, also the single entrance is a massive problem, because if we have a storm event and the road is flooded, or if there's a traffic event and an accident at the front of the area, you have now 63 units that have no ability to get any type of emergency vehicle in there. So the single entry it doesn't function, especially for 63 units. So, I mean, a lot of those things are massive safety concerns. And really, at the end of the day, there's no reason for it. And listen, Briday, there's nothing wrong with the development that they have of multi-use. It just doesn't fit in this neighborhood. It's very simple to go back to the developer. I know everybody wants to make money on what they're doing. There's money there to be had on a single family development or something like what was built on Carmelita. There's no reason why that can't be built here, other than administration allowing this conversation to continue to go, because this conversation is just a facsimile of what we had back in 2019. There's no difference to the conversation here. You have the neighbors saying, guys, this is going to ruin our neighborhood, yet administration is constantly pushing the agenda and the conversation forward. So there's something that we're not connecting here. There's no connection happening. There's a problem with, guys, at some point, you've got to go back to the developer and say, guys, the neighborhood really doesn't want it. Cannot you come up with a proposal that's single family homes or townhomes that are 1 story? That's going to work. Everybody will be completely happy with that. We don't have to deal with a garbage can or a garbage lid or a parking garage, and all this item. We just need council and administration to go back to Mr. Briday and say, listen, we appreciate you'd like to maximize profit out of your project here, but the development just doesn't fit. There's plenty of other land which can be purchased on major roads. Again, there's a big difference, and this is a local road. This is not a major road. It's not Les Bronze. It's not Tecumseh. It's not Manning. This fits perfectly on a Tecumseh, Les Bronze, or Manning road. You have access. It fits within the multi-use designation. It just doesn't work in our neighborhood. And I must say, and also reiterate that, like I say, we've created this as an accessible home for our daughter. Just the addition of post office boxes here has made this less accessible for her already, because she's blind and can't get around very well. So I can just imagine with the increase in traffic here, like I say, it would really, spur on the idea of moving from the area. And I really, I'm disappointed that that this could be an eventuality for us. As we love living here. We love the neighborhood, the neighbors, hats off to all the neighbors. You didn't have any engineers or anybody, but they've done very well in voicing their concerns with the and they're very valid concerns. So the only,
you can wrap up, Mr. Merkel.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, no, like I said, I haven't prepared any comments. I kind of came into the meeting pretty unbiased here. These have just been notes that I've kind of done during the meeting, and I really am requesting from council a formal response back to Mr. Ublansky and Briday to say, please come up with a development that fits the area. That would be my formal request. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Merkel. Okay, we'll move on to Mr. Mark Lukaniak.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, Mr. Mayor. Before you start the clock ticking, I just want to say that it's a bit unfair for you to cut us in our time in half right before the meeting. If you'd have let me know a day ahead of time when you saw there were 20 people speaking, I would have been able to tailor what I had to say a little bit more appropriately. I spent the last 2 hours trying to cut out as much as I could. I'm going to speak really fast. If I go a little bit over the 5 minutes.
Don't worry, we'll allow for that. We won't cut you off.
Okay. In the words of Council Member Dowie, nobody likes to see their neighborhood devolve. I would like to address my comments mainly to the developers. Reading your proposal, I was insulted by the comment that the neighborhood has no overall character or historic value, and your apology did not seem sincere. Since you are outsiders, I want to provide you with a short history lesson. I live on St. Pierre Street, a block away from Victoria's School. My parents bought the property in 1952, the year I was born, and I have lived here for my entire life. I live here because Tecumseh and our neighborhood have a very special character and history. When I was a boy, there was a sign at the town limits which said Tecumseh, population 2,500. And it remained that size for many years. There were 10 drinking establishments in town, 5 of them within a stone's throw of St. Anne's Church. The owner of the Tecumseh House was a huge Montreal Canadiens fan. He filled the walls of the bar with autographed hockey sticks and other memorabilia. It wasn't unusual to look up from your bar stool to see a famous NHL player having a drink beside you. Whenever the Canadiens won the Stanley Cup, the owner would give out free drinks for the entire night. Tecumseh had a lot of character back then. It still does, even though the Tea House and the Golden House burned down and the other bars like the Shawnee Tavern are also gone. In fact, Tecumseh had so much character that everybody wanted to move here. In the 1960s, Windsor tried very hard to annex the town, but the people in the town council resisted. Riverside, Sandwich, East and West got swallowed up but our town stay independent and unique. Just a few years ago, we were again under threat of being amalgamated with Windsor, but we resisted and kept our own identity. We believed that our special character was worth preserving. When I was growing up, there was no Little River Road. To the northeast between us and Lacoste Park, there were only cornfields. To the southeast towards Victoria School, there was a vacant field where we would pick wild strawberries. A drainage ditch ran through the middle of the fields, and it passed by Victoria School, where we would catch turtles and frogs. At one time, it was a stream that drained into Lake St. Clair. And I want to let you know, I've been in contact with the First Nations group to see if they could shed any light on the history of that land. When Victoria School opened in 1925, there would have been a considerable amount of fanfare. The Union Jack would have been raised up the tall flagpole, and every time I passed the school, I would see it, or in later years, our maple leaf flag flying, and I'd feel very proud to be a Canadian. Since we didn't have a park in our neighborhood, the schoolyard was where we flew our kites, played hockey and Little League baseball, and my children also did so on the same diamonds. I went to St. Pius X, but most of my friends attended Victoria. I knew the names of the teachers and even the janitor, Mr. Lawson. In winter, he would build a skating rink at Victoria. After school hours, we would play hockey there. One little boy who lived across the street from the school would ask us to play hockey with us bigger kids. We would let him play, but we told little Timmy that he had to play goal because he couldn't skate very well. Even so, he kept coming back and playing because he loved the game. Little Timmy Kerr grew up and became an NHL superstar, scoring more than 50 goals in 4 different seasons. Then the school closed, and one day I heard heavy machines rumble into our neighborhood. A few days later, it was gone, flagpole and all. There was no fanfare. Nothing was done to honor the hundreds of teachers and thousands of students who went there during its almost 100-year history. By building your apartments here, you will destroy the character of our neighborhood. You could build something that we can all be proud of, houses that will retain the special character of the area, but I don't believe that you are concerned with improving the neighborhood or the town. I feel that your only purpose is to make as much money as you possibly can at our loss. The bottom line is this: there is a big difference between living in a neighborhood like ours and one that has apartments, which is what your stacked townhouses are. Even the name Victoria by the Lake is also a misrepresentation. Here we cut our own lawns, we help our neighbors clear the snow in winter, we plant flower and vegetable gardens, we take pride in improving our properties and giving them our own character. We live here because that is the kind of neighborhood we want to live in. These are some of the things which makes our neighborhood special. It wasn't the bars or the cornfields that made Tecumseh special and gave it its character. It was the people in the neighborhoods, like the one around Victoria School. That's what still makes it a good place to raise families and enjoy a certain quality of life. If you don't think there is any special overall character or history here, then you must not think that Tecumseh has any character either. You must not think that Canada is special as a country. You must not feel that there's character in a little boy who cannot skate growing up to becoming a hockey superstar. Our neighborhood does have a special overall character. Neighborhoods like ours make Canada the friendly, neighborly country that it is, and our town planners should recognize that. If you cannot appreciate that reality, but can only see dollar signs, then I suggest that you take your townhouses and stack them somewhere else, because this is no place for them here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Welcome.
Thank you for your presentation. All right, our final speaker this evening is Mr. Jeff Peltier.
Good evening. Hi, this is, I'm here with my husband, Jeff, and my name is Tina. I'm going to be speaking for us today.
Welcome, Tina.
Thank you. We're not going to reiterate all that has been brought forward by the opposing delegates, although we are in agreement What makes Tecumseh so great is the small town feel, and that's why it's so difficult to find housing in the area. It is a great community to live in, but if the town allows the development of these multi-unit residences and it continues throughout the town of Tecumseh, it will no longer be the small town that everyone desires. The developments in Lakeshore and East Windsor are quite frightening as is. I've lived in Tecumseh my whole life, and the area surrounding is beginning to look unrecognizable. We are not opposed to developing the area. We just don't agree with the density that these units would bring. The Lakewood area that Mr. Ublansky developed are single-family homes. This development cannot be compared to a 63-unit development. Even with everything brought forward, we are still not convinced that there will be no adverse effects on local traffic or have serious impact on our local infrastructure. Our only question, in addition to what has already been addressed, is the council admits that Dillon Drive requires improvements in infrastructure. If this development is passed, can you ensure that these improvements will be made a priority and completed promptly based on the timeline of the development? Or will we be waiting years for this to happen because Area 1 is not considered a first priority based on our current low density location? That's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Pelletier and Jeff. Okay, now if we can show council, Sean, and I want to take this opportunity now to open it up for members of council if they have any questions or certainly comments. And I can't see I only see two members. I see Councillor Houston and Councillor Dowie at this time. Councillor Dowie, I think you had your hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. And first, before I ask my questions, I do want to thank all of the delegations who have presented tonight. The dozens, and I mean dozens of individuals who have allowed me to have conversations with them in the last week on this subject. I wanted to I have a couple questions with the applicant and then a couple others for the administration following.
Go ahead.
So first, my questions for the applicant. I think we've heard from the neighborhood that they feel this is an unwelcome intensity of development, that development is welcomed, but just this is a degree of intensification that they find incompatible with the neighborhood. And I'm wondering if you might be able to comment on that, why something that's more to what they are seeking or what they feel comfortable with is not possible to be achieved with your vision.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay. So I think I can speak to that first of all and say that we should keep in mind that this wasn't all 100% against development here. Let's keep in mind that there were speakers in favor of it. And I also want to point out that many of the people in favor of this are not present here tonight because, once again, they're not interested in the process of this. They're interested in the process of buying properties, living in the area. So the feedback that I have received from potential buyers, from real estate agents, from builders has been equally, if not greater, and overwhelming than what you have experienced as far as the negative aspects. And it happens in development all the time. This is the process. I also feel as though this, as we heard from the real estate agents that spoke earlier, is a type of housing that is in high demand and something that I want to provide to the area to satisfy that demand. I think that going back to our first proposal, we have come back considerably from what we were proposing at the start. And I'm very comfortable, once again, that this will satisfy actually be satisfactory to what the residents are looking for, are wanting. And it's very tough to say. I mean, we heard from a couple of the residents as far as saying things like, I haven't seen elevators or lifts in this development. And that's just not fair to say, because they are in development. And that, going along the same lines of reasoning there, he could also say that he hasn't seen bathrooms or kitchens, but those are going to be in the development as well. So I just feel as though there is a degree of professionalism and care and time and effort that has been put into this development. And I'm very proud to bring it forward here. And I'm really looking forward to bringing this successful to the community and see another great development that I can be a part of.
Supplementary, Councillor Dowie.
Thank you, Your Worship. And so maybe I'll bundle two questions into one, just for ease of response. One is, I know it's been mentioned, and not so much tonight, but in private comments to me, concern for the architectural features of the proposal. And so I wanted to see if you'd have a willingness to revisit some of those architectural features in a manner that that the neighborhood could have some additional feedback on, and show that there's a bit more of an maybe an integration with the neighborhood in terms of how it already looks, versus introducing something distinctive, because I believe that's been a recurring theme as well.
I think I can speak to that as well, in saying that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, either Brian or Casey, that during the site plan process, there can be tweaks done to the look and design as well, as far as amount of brick and architectural accents, etc. But I do want to make certain here that I have had very good feedback to what the design looks like as well. And we did spend considerable time picking out elements within the community, as well as elements of the former school that we're reflecting in the new building here. And it's not as easy to see in the 6 or 7 or 8 drawings that you have, but during the process, there will be more. And there are features where I've taken the time to respect the history of the school, taking the colors of the brick, taking some of the architectural brick features. There were pillars, sort of, if we have some old photos of the school, that ran up the front of the original building. And these will be echoed in the stacked townhomes as well. If you've noticed on the property, it's my intention to incorporate the old school sign that says Victoria, that has been taken from the school during the demolition process. So I'm very aware. Again, I live in this community, in this neighborhood, and I only want to bring something that I'm proud of to this area. So I do look forward to doing that. And I think that we'll all be happy when we see what is created here.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Jablansky, for that. I guess my final question of you is whether you know, you've heard any comments here tonight that would cause a change to your proposal.
I think there's been many comments tonight here that I'm listening to, but I don't know how. I mean, listen, the evening just ended here. I'll look at things, and I am constant that this is a fluid process here to a certain degree. But I've taken a lot of time and effort in bringing forward what I feel is an excellent development here, and I'm very happy moving forward with it. I think that once again, it's going to be a very good addition to this area.
Okay, thank you very much. And so through Your Worship, to the administration, I had a couple questions, and they're maybe dry for the audience, but I think they're relevant to the situation here. So it comes down to really how the town has been previously laid out if you look throughout the old town of Tecumseh, it appears as if those who came before us had a consistent vision for how density would be laid out. In looking at a map of certainly the former town of Tecumseh, you don't find R1 next to R3. You do find a stepping of it where there's R2 next to R3 and there's R2 next to R1. So the jump from R1 to R3 does not appear to be happening in too many places, with a couple of exceptions. I think that the most notable one would be Michael Drive from north of St. Thomas and Michael Drive south of St. Thomas. And there are a couple of single units that are R3 in a predominantly R1 zone, but just not to this scale. So I guess I'm hoping for maybe a history lesson as to why, from a planning perspective, those who came before us would have designed the town that way, and whether there remains relevance for following that kind of standard today.
Mr. Hillman.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Dowie, for that question. A couple of things come to mind. The zoning that we see throughout the town has evolved as development progressed. And I think, it was very helpful. Mr. Peltier sort of brought back the reality that this area actually was undeveloped at one time. And so development proceeds through different economic drivers through time. And there is a considerable amount of history in this part of the town. And there are eras through the 50s, 60s, and then a blast in the 80s and 90s where development took place. So I think there's a couple of things to be clear on. One is the official plan is really what sets out the parameter for density. And the official plan did set out broad areas that were designated for residential. And then it established criteria for where you could consider different types of density. The current zoning bylaw does have 3 residential zones, and R1, which is exclusively single unit with 60 foot frontage, okay, and a density of around 15 units a hectare. And the R2 zone is also single unit exclusively, with just slightly smaller lots being 50 foot frontage and 18 units in hectare. From a planning perspective, very similar in terms of the allowances there, very low density and single unit development. And R3 is a zone that it would appear was throughout the town, and it was driven, I would suspect, by proposals. So it's hard to, and it allowed everything from semi-detached townhomes, low-rise apartments, and so on. I don't think one could discern from the zoning that we see that ends up being the zoning map of Ontario a certain thinking that R3 is only near R1. I would suggest it may be coincidental, because really it would be the official plan that would be the driver, and the policies that would have determined where should those R3 uses go. So I don't know if there's a rhyme or reason to R3 near R1 versus R2 as a instructive thinking of past town planners. I think one would look to the OP and read it and try and unravel what were the guiding principles that allowed those lands to be zoned a certain way. So I hope that's helpful. And I think there is a mix of it. You did make reference to that. And the R3 does seem to show up at various locations throughout the town.
Thank you for that. Supplementary, Your Worship?
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Dowie.
So with that, what raised tonight was the matter of the egress, ingress of the site. In the other areas that have an R3, it appears as if those vehicles exit onto a collector road. This would appear to be the only case that I can tell where it empties onto a local road and into a local neighborhood that isn't already designated as a collector route. Is this something that is just a coincidence, or is it more desirable to have developments like this intersect with a collector road versus a local road?
Okay, thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Dowie. I think there's two parts to answer this. One is that looking quickly at some of the medium density developments through the town, I would say the bulk would exit onto an arterial or collector road. There are probably of the maybe a dozen, and there's about 3 areas that would have traffic emptying onto a local street. Okay, so there it's allowable, and then that, which leads us to the official plan policies. And what they indicate is that in the existing official plan that predates the one recently adopted by council, under which this application was filed, the maximum density for residential zones, which are allowed throughout the residential lands in Tecumseh in the official plan, is 30 units per hectare. Okay, and it establishes a couple of things that I think maybe were misstated this evening. It allows a full range of duplex, triplex, townhouses, and other multi-unit residential dwellings not to exceed 3 stories in height. So 3 stories in height is allowed for medium density residential. What the official plan then goes on to say is that when council is looking at the criteria for the creation of medium and high density zone categories, it establishes medium and high density residential uses should have frontage and or access driveways onto an arterial or a collector road. Dillon is not. Little River is. So I think an operative word here, though, is that it should have frontage. And I think some of the developments that don't would speak to the fact there can be consideration for other than an arterial or a collector, subject to continuing to read the policy, which establishes, because they would have used the word shall. Shall is the word that instructs, that's the choice and that's the only choice. The next set of policies is that the proposal will not be approved, which would result in substantial traffic flow increases on local streets, serving single unit residential development, which would be this, the surrounding neighborhood to this site, which from our estimation, the proposal would meet that test. And apartment proposals for more than 3 stories should be separated from adjacent dwellings by a distance sufficient to maintain the privacy, amenity, and value of surrounding residential properties. And that's for apartment proposals that are more than 3 stories. So what we observe in this proposal is that the components that are 3 stories do in fact meet that test, but it's not a test that they're required to meet. So I think that's a 2-part answer. It would be common to see them on arterial and collectors, but not absolutely necessary.
Okay, thank you. And supplementary, Your Worship, I think I've got 3 more for administration. The next couple will really deal with maybe something that's beyond my, I guess I like to read these, but I may not know exactly what they say. It has to do with our friends at the local planning appeals tribunal in the Ontario Municipal Board. So in the provincial policy statement, that word shall comes up, and I referenced section 1.43 and B, and it's basically the 1.43 says planning authorities shall provide for an appropriate range of mix of housing options and densities to meet projected market-based and affordable housing needs of current and future residents of the regional market area by, and then I'll jump to section B, 2, permitting and facilitating all types of residential intensification, including additional residential units and redevelopment in accordance with policy 1.3.3. I guess my question is this: does this obligate town council to accept any kind of intensification, or is that intensification subject to limits as deemed suitable by the town council?
Go ahead, Mr. Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Dowie. So I wouldn't suggest that it mandates council to accept any intensification proposal. I think fit is an important consideration, and there's no formula for fit. It involves professional judgment, and it involves sort of a test of compatibility. And although there's there is no formula and there are no guidelines listed in the current official plan with respect to compatibility. There's a generally accepted framework for that. And that includes shadow effects, privacy or intrusive overlook, light spillover, and whether a development has had regard in terms of transitioning from what's surrounding it. So when you look at fit and what types of intensification projects you should be considering, you have to look at those types of criteria and consider whether they've been addressed and whether there's any opportunity to mitigate the development in a way that would better make for a better fit. So the there's not a requirement, but there's a very strong upper tier, upper level, top-down policy approach that encourages intensification. I think that's one of the things that when Brian was talking about how things have changed over time. What we are experiencing now is a planning environment that is really encouraging intensification and sensitive intensification for a number of good reasons. It's a better use of infrastructure. Makes communities more transit friendly. There's a transit bus that goes right along Dillon Drive, right in front of this development. Makes communities more walkable. So for a number of good reasons, we should be looking at ways to provide intensification as long as it's done sensitively and fits with the surrounding context.
So just thank you for that, Chad. I guess I'm still maybe a bit in the dark as to whether the determination of what fits remains a function of this council or whether that definitions are even set through established precedents.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, perhaps just before, before Chad continues, I didn't realize, sorry, Chad, you're going to put your hand up there. I think without having that policy section right in front of us, I would say that they're, based on what you've asked, they're the use of the words shall, which we are familiar with that section of the PPS, which is a very strong determination. So the messaging is that these opportunities be made available. I think what the PPS is trying to say that we as planners, council as the decision makers, has the ability to consider these decisions in the context of your local community. And what fits is there's a professional judgment that we can use, and Chad went through some of the tests. And there are considerations that council might have that are different than those. So we really can speak to the concept of professional planning judgments and opinions and concepts that guide our recommendations to council that are, based on the desire for a vibrant, complete community. But the PPS is certainly setting a stage there for having regard to context. And it's a question of how one perceives the measurement of, is something contextually sensitive or is it not? And that's the advice that we try and give council. I think you had said, is there something along the lines of LPAT, have they sort of distinguished matters in this regard? Certainly without looking up decisions, that's difficult to say for certain. LPAT makes decisions from different members constantly, which of course the OMB preceded. And there certainly would be some determining decisions, I'm sure. One thing we want to be cautious of is the PPS has changed recently and there were some substantive changes. So when we bring a report back to council, we will speak to the current PPS that will help guide some of these decisions as well. And so
Mr. Jeffries.
Thank you.
I'd just like to quickly add, Mr. Mayor, that LPAT is a quasi-judicial tribunal. So it's not bound by previous decisions. So it's not precedent setting, but those decisions do help inform decisions to a certain extent. So they can be used as examples, but it's not precedent setting or it's not bound. They're not duty bound to follow them.
Thank you for that. And my final question is this, and still related to LPAT. I'm aware of a number of cases in the Ottawa area where there are arguments with respect to character, and which is something that isn't quite tangible. It's not based on really just I call it not based on a defined planning principle. I think that's something you feel with respect to development. And surprising one from this past January basically had the LPAT advance a case to this coming September on the basis of an appeal of character and not based on a planning principle. And so with that, I wanted to find out if you're aware of whether there has been some sort of consideration of, what does character mean? And I think we have had I guess in your report, what the professional planning opinion is, and would you say that definition is sustained under a tribunal system? Because this decision that I found from January 15th is one that seems to give me some uncertainty as to what to expect and why an appeal is heard by the LPAT if not for planning principles. So hopeful that you might be able to shed a bit of light.
Sure, Mr. Mayor, I'll start, and if anyone wants to weigh in, please do. So I view character as a planning principle, and it's a consideration in any land use planning decision-making process. But it can be defined differently by different communities. And again, I'm not entirely familiar with the LPAT decision that you're referring to. I will be certain to look it up and study it and analyze it and determine what considerations were made in that. But character can differ, and one community's definition of character might be somewhat different from another community's definition of character. But character typically involves looking at the surrounding area. What's its makeup? What are the architectural styles? What's the streetscape presence? Balancing all these elements that comprise a neighborhood, a community, and making sure that is not undermined by a particular development. But again, there's no real formula for that, Councillor Dowdy.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, just very briefly, just reiterate, we will look up the hearing you're speaking to in Ottawa and try and understand what the board was dealing with there and what the factors were that are under consideration. And I think just to follow up with Chad's comment, character can mean a lot of different things. So we could probably come to some consensus on what does the term character mean, neighborhood character. But I think there are elements, and it came out tonight through a number of speakers. It's not just the built form. It's not that there's an architectural style necessarily or a streetscape. Those all add to it. There are also the elements of, is it a accessible community? Is it equitable? Is it walkable? Does it have a personality? I've seen that word used in association with character. Does it allow for transitional lifestyles from living there, moving out, coming back, raising kids, spending your senior years? It's a very interesting question, and you're quite correct. I don't think it's a common nomenclature from a policy perspective quite often, but it's used to describe landscapes and communities and neighborhoods. And I think there's a lot of elements that go with that. Does a school would add character, a corner store would add character. And then you can look for common attributes. So it's a very challenging word to use. And we use it cautiously. I think it would be dangerous just to use it sort of homogeneously. It's just one built form, and that defines character. I think there's much more to the character of a community.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Dowie. Any further questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Bichetti, Houston, Altanoff, and I have a few questions myself.
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to thank the delegations and Mr. Ublansky, your team there for tonight. Again, it was a meeting that was well put together by administration, that we put it on a separate night to give dedication to the time and to listen to everybody's concern. Before I ask my question, I just want to give you some comments, some history on where I grew up. I grew up in Fontainebleau. And back then, my father purchased 2-3 lots. It was a residential area just off of Rivard, there off Tecumseh Road. And so it was a great neighborhood. I attended St. Alexander School, which is now closed, ironically. And across the street was an empty field. And so we knew that was a new subdivision back in the 70s. And lo and behold, there was a commercial piece of property that was carved out and it became Canadian Tire. I remember playing hockey there with my friends, and now it's a Food Basic, I think. And a few years later, maybe 5 years later, the senior complex, the 9-floor senior apartment was built. It was the shape of a cross. And I remember my grandfather was the watchman that they hired because he lived across the street and during the construction. So here we are, building a residential area. We've got these 2 massive commercial and, multi-residential units across the street. And I believe as the years went by, I'm now in high school. We had a vacant lot right next to us. And lo and behold, zone R1, they went to the city and they got it 4-unit, it was a 3-story right next to us. So that my father says, you know what, we're moving, put the house for sale. In 1987, we moved to Tecumseh. And so those are things, and that's where, when you listen to the residents, there is that value of character where you live. And so I appreciate that sentiment. However, we're also dealing with the planning process. They had every right to do that, to rezone their property owners. But again, as a person living there, we had a choice, either stay there or move. And so we moved to Tecumseh. And that's one of the reasons I ran on council. I support planned development. And in this situation here, I think there is a win-win. I believe Mr. Ublansky has a commitment that, he wants to work with the community. He's proven himself there at Lakewood Development there with the homes and the whole golf course going back into that history. And so what I'm hoping that we gather here tonight is that we go back and see if there's a possibility, going back to September 9th, 2019, there was a lot of residents' concerns. Density is too high. Well, there's been no change to that. Design of buildings didn't fit the area. No change to that tonight. The height of the building is excessive. That was another resident's concern. No change. Development is overcrowded, too many units, too many buildings. Again, no change to the number of units. And Briday adds additional structure for parking. And then the issue of flooding. Briday will elevate its own land. So I can understand the frustration on the residents. However, we need to find a medium. There's got to be a compromise where, we could have a win-win. And I'm hoping that tonight's meeting, all these comments will be taken to heart and we can move forward. So again, that's my comment. Now, just a couple of questions, Your Honor, if I may.
Go ahead.
Is Chris Toldo still on? He's one of the delegations, Christopher Toldo, or the other?
I am.
Okay. Hi, Chris. Just a question. You mentioned real estate market. And again, there is a need for diverse housing. I support, I got a young adult daughter who may want to stay in Tecumseh. She can't afford anything. And, so diverse housing is important. But again, is it in the right location? Should it be, along a collector road or, Manning Road? Those are all questions that were brought up tonight. But my question to you, Chris, is in terms of the real estate market, and I think Councillor Dowie talked about the LPAT, if this gets appealed either by the developer or by the residents, this may be tied up for 2, 3, 4, who knows how long it'll be tied up for. In real estate, and I used to be in it, it's all timing. And if we miss, the timing where the market is hot, you might end up hitting the market when interest rates go up. Right now, money, you can, get good interest rates, but if it goes up, that changes a lot of factors. And so would you say the market right now moving in the future, what you foresee?
You know what, I only can speak on current market conditions. That's what I'm not here to speculate what tomorrow is going to bring, because I can't. If I had a crystal ball, I would have probably bought 100 houses in Windsor 5 years ago. That being said, yeah, it depends on a lot of factors. I just know right now there's a large need for housing. A lot of people relocating to Windsor and the surrounding areas. Today, just hypothetically, just bringing this scenario in, I had 12 offers today on one of my listings. Again, that's 11 people that are still in need of housing down here. And that just doesn't get absorbed overnight.
Yeah, and then I think that goes to my point that the market is now. We needed this diverse housing last year, 2 years ago.
Yesterday.
And so any further delays is going to just stagnate and not allow people to be able to purchase their dwellings. And so moving forward, like I said, after tonight, I'm hoping that there'll be these comments taken and with administration, that we can find that middle ground where, if it's a matter of reducing, and maybe I have a question for Mr. Ublansky there. The third floor in that one center building, how many units are in there? Oh, you're still on mute?
How about that?
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
So the center stacked townhome unit is what you're referring to?
Yes.
I believe there are 24 units within that building. And again, 8 of those units were all main floor, single story, ground level only. So I know it seems like I'm fighting an uphill battle here tonight at times with some of the misinformation that's being put in front of council and everyone here, as far as these are walk-ups only. I hear, how will seniors get up and down stairs? How will young families get up and down with groceries? This isn't the case just in, this isn't the case for all of these, right? Again, there's a mixed use, there's a mix of these units within the stacked townhome structure.
Okay, thank you. So that's it, Mr. Mayor, for me.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilor Houston.
Thank you, Your Worship. And again, thank you to Mr. Ublansky, all of the residents, whether you're for or against, for coming out tonight and, sharing your thoughts and concerns. A couple of my questions were answered before, but really, I've got 2, and the first one's for administration, the second one maybe for Mr. Ublansky or administration as well. So my first one is we heard some negative comments regarding parkland and green space. So if you could just clarify for the development on just how green space is calculated, or what it includes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Councillor Houston. So green space is basically, in simple terms, the area of land that is left over after you take out the built area and the areas that are hard surfaced, whether it be for sidewalks, driveways, or parking areas. I do not have the calculation with me. We will find it out. I do have a note to do that. But a couple of things come to mind. One, I would expect the green space to be somewhere probably in the range of 30% or more on this type of development, just looking at the layout of the land, because, keep in mind, these are, the units that are proposed along the west and south side are set up in a way that's quite common for a street. You have a backyard of, 30 plus feet. And I think in the one area in the south end, it's in excess of 40 feet. That's green space. All along the McCall land side, a good portion of it is left green. And the interior does have some green elements. I would agree. There are components on the interior of the site that are more hard surfaced than the exterior elements. And then across the front, primarily in front of the stacked townhouse that's closer to Dillon, it would be all considered green space from a open space perspective. Okay, so I think one thing we'll commit to is determine what is that percentage of the site that is proposed as green space unless the developer or his planner know. It's just not a calculation I have with me. And it's quite normal in residential areas that it be in the 30 to 35% range. When you think of some of our single unit developments, particularly lately, it's very common to have 2-car garages now, wide driveways, rear yards that are quite often, if not pools, hard surfaced in some way. So those all go to, generally, there has been an ongoing change in green open space in our urban areas, and certainly not just your more dense areas, but even in our lower density areas that are being developed.
I can actually jump in there with the site-specific numbers. Brian's correct. The requirement under the R3 zone is a minimum of 30% of the developable area should be dedicated to landscape open space. Our site plan is calculated at currently as shown at 50% landscape open space.
Casey, did I hear you correctly? You said 60?
50.
Okay, thank you. And my second question, there's been a lot of reference in the opposition tonight with regards to the 2-story height, or a lot of reference to like a 1-story townhome. And when I think of 1-story, I think of ground level or with a basement. So I'm just curious with the design of a lot of the 2-story townhomes, recognizing that it is a flood-prone area, and it's been referenced that the development does not have any basements. So I'm just curious as to, is the choice in moving towards 2-story, is that flood mitigation and risk design choice, or is it something which was recommended by IRCA in that basements are not allowed at all? So I'm not sure if that would be to Mr. Jablansky or administration, but just curious.
I think I can start from a design and marketing perspective, as well as concerns. This isn't, as we said, Carmelita Court. It's located in a different area. And again, I do want to stress that townhomes, even that are, you're talking townhomes with 1 level above ground. But once again, I have to stress that the majority of townhomes that I know of that are that 1 townhome look that we did in Lakewood, that have been done at Carmelita Court, have their finished basement as well. So you really are talking still about a 2-story townhome, which is what we're doing, but we are doing that added extra bit of precaution as far as bringing the 2 stories above ground. I do want to say that we have designed a lift, an elevator lift space within every one of these units as well, which makes it very accessible. I know that this isn't something that's featured in any other townhomes in the area. We think it's a distinct feature that's going to be a desirable to have here. And I don't know if the mayor's townhome itself has one, but if it doesn't, then I'm hoping that in his senior years, decades from now, perhaps he can transition to one of these too. But in all seriousness, it is a feature that is something that is appealing to what I am hearing from the builders and the agents that I'm working with and talking to, that people are wanting to have in the area as well. So we think that the design is very nice, and that it is something that is very marketable and something that will fit into the area. So I am looking forward to showing what this type of product is. And once again, I've been through this before enough to understand real estate markets and see where things are going. And I am very confident that this will be a successful development and endeavor here, if given the chance.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Tonio. Yeah, I got everybody.
Might as well, yep. It's a good presentation by all. It was a great job. I appreciate the dedication towards their passion, towards their neighborhood, to our citizens, and Dave, towards your vision on this development. So I appreciate that and respect that. I'm a visual person, so I've been driving by the place a lot, trying to visualize heights and things like that, and how the density would look with different things inside. And I'm actually on our town website mapping system trying to visualize the size of that area with some of our other developments in the area and how that density would look in different numbers in different areas. So I am going to absorb all this information. Just one question for Dave. Is there a development around here I can drive up to and say, this is what it looks like?
Unfortunately, there isn't in the area. This is something that is seen across the province. And I think that I'm excited again to bring something like this here. It's successful everywhere else outside of the this area. And I think that's a product that people are going to be very pleased with here.
If I may jump in onto David's, I've seen 2 developments that are, well, actually 3 close to David's. One's in Niagara on the Lake on the way in, one's in the city of Peterborough, and one of them that Brian is familiar with, and some members of council, Cherry Hill in Michigan. And so with a uniqueness, and they've had a mixture around the area of single family. They had condominiums, I don't know, you could call them stacked, I guess, stacked condominiums with walk up outside. And then they had obviously the traditional townhomes within them. And so those 3 communities, and the 2 in particular, the one in Peterborough and the one in Niagara on the Lake, are built in existing subdivisions. So there are some in Ontario, as he stated, but there's none here.
Dave, you good, Dad?
Yeah, I think that's
okay. Thanks. Okay, maybe I'll get the address from you, Mr. Mayor, and go for a ride one day.
I might, if I'm lucky, I might still have some pictures.
And you, speaking of the green space, we have the 50-30% idea that you guys are discussing there. Would, in both scenarios, would the height of the homes be the same? Or are we talking different heights here? When we're, green space is the land on the ground, but 3-dimensionally, are we talking, you know, it could be higher. Is the green space considered the same? I guess we go by the R3, R2 one. Gotcha. I see Brian shaking his head.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, so green space is a measure looking down on the site and identifying hard surfaces versus green spaces.
Okay, so it's not
an element of elevation or
okay,
height of buildings or anything. No.
That helps my question. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
All right, Councillor Altenhoff.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to to everyone who's attended this evening. I certainly appreciate your incredible passion for this, your commitment to our community, and it's really, to be honest with you, I think it kind of raises the hairs on our arms. It's certainly wonderful to see these things, but I think there was a word or two that was raised by, I know Mr. Tino at least, I know Mr. Deputy Mayor Bichetti. This word of compromise, and compromise is always a bit of a challenge, but we got to certainly, to everyone, recognizing, the dynamics of this incredible situation we're in with real estate and how it's changed dramatically just over a very short period of time, the need from our residents as well as outside, and certainly critically the neighbors that, are have lived in this area for so long. We have to look at all of these metrics, if you will, when we try to compromise. So I'll just preface my opening or my statement on this, and I hope that some level of compromise can come from all sides, so that ultimately what we see, what is brought before council, will make our decision a lot more easier for everyone. But I have a series of questions for the developer, Mr. Jablansky, as well as to town administration. First off, to Mr. Jablansky, one question with regards to the covered parking garage. What's the rationale for it? I mean, could we just live with, paved asphalt? I mean, is there a reason for that parking structure? And on this concept of the parking structure, any consideration towards underground parking? I know that's obviously a cost. It somewhat mitigates the issue of trying to keep things up to mitigate flooding. But I'm just wondering, on that part of parking, please.
If I can start, actually, I'll get to the parking and the one level parking structure as well. But if I can go back to compromise, I just want to remind those here tonight and council that we really have done a lot of compromise that I don't feel is being recognized, going right back to the first PIC, which was late November of 2018, whereby it was our intention to bring forward a similar type style condominium, a 6-story condominium that similar to what Petretta has got started off of Pike Creek there, surrounded by townhomes. And that really was the goal here, thinking that the housing that I was trying to offer there was in demand, would work. And yet the community came back with a resounding, we don't want that. And I did listen to that. And I did compromise the initial ideas that I had for this development down from over 105 or 109 units to where it sits today. So I do appreciate compromise. I hope that it's recognized that I am a very fair person. I have made considerable compromise to the project thus far during this multi-year process that I have been going through to get to the stage that I am at today. So to bring, hopefully I've helped to clear that up a little bit or add a little bit more information to it, because it has been a long process of compromise and change and planning going into all this. To go back to the parking, the covered parking structure that you're referring to, again, as much as it seems as though that wasn't something that I was doing for lack of compromise, it was. I heard from the residents that they're concerned with the height, even though it conforms what I'm proposing there, that there are ways to architecturally soften the transition from single families to a 3-story stacked townhome. And one of those ways that would lessen the overall pavement feel toward the development would be to buffer it with a parking structure between the homes, the unopened road allowance into a parking structure that will lead into that. And by the way, the parking structure will also allow me the ability to architecturally soften it as well. It's not going to be, as I heard, which is somewhat insulting again to me, to say it looks like storage units. These are not storage unit looking structures. None of them are. There's the opportunity to do window treatment like facades, et cetera, at the back, and landscaping. To remind you that, I'm very familiar with being able to do things like that. If we go back even to the Lakewood development there and the great amount of landscaping that was put into that, from the stormwater retention area all the way through the boulevards. And there were a lot of time and effort and thought put into that, and compromise as well, I should say, during the whole site plan process. So the covered parking garage isn't just a last minute decision we should put a covered parking garage. It's part of a decision to tie in the architecture together throughout the development, to limit some of the paved parking space there and cover it, to build transition between the existing neighborhood toward the interior of the proposed development. So again, it's something that I put a lot of thought into, much like the rest of the development that is being proposed.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Topic of, elevators within the, the various, the kind of the buildings associated with the facility. You've indicated a number of times, but we've heard the kind of the contrary. So I just want to clear it out and make sure that it's understood. It sounds like the 2-story facilities will have elevators as well as the 3-story?
So the townhomes themselves that surround the stacked towns, the townhomes are the ones that have the design plans for an elevator. And you're not thinking, a residential elevator is not a commercial, Otis, check by whatever once a month type of elevator. It's a platform lift that's able to do that. It can be encapsulated into a glass type feature within the unit, and it's not cost prohibitive. You find it again outside of this area which is what I want to bring here, because I think it's a very good selling feature, and I think people will enjoy that as well. So to get back to the question, no, they're not available in the stacked units. But once again, the stacked units aren't all walk-ups the whole way. Again, there is a number of the units that are all ground floor, no staircases, walk straight through, that are between 1,200 and 1,400 square feet as two-bedroom units.
I appreciate that. And thank you for that. And now I don't know if it's best for yourself or perhaps to the consultants here. On the single entrance point, I know there was a traffic study done, I'm assuming on the municipal streets, but what about the flow through that single entrance? I'm kind of curious on the, is that going to be a bottleneck? Is it going to be concerning? So I don't know, Mr. Ublansky, if it's best for you or your consultants. I guess I'd like a bit of reassurance that this will certainly work, please.
I can defer to my consultant planner, Casey Kolchecki, who will probably speak to the traffic study that was done, and I'll let him speak if he sees.
Thanks, David. Yeah, certainly. So I'm personally not a traffic expert, so a lot of my information will just be me providing you the conclusions of the traffic report. In working with our traffic consultant, one of the key considerations was the previous institutional use versus the proposed residential use. And our traffic consultant concluded that they were very similar in the traffic volumes, especially during peak times, start of the school day, end of the school day, start of the workday, end of the workday. And that school site also had a single access into its parking area. So we really ended up seeing a very similar situation between the pre-development situation and the post-development situation, where those traffic flows were very similar, with a marginal increase for the proposed development, but not impacting the surrounding roadways. We did discuss the single access issue and whether or not there would be any concerns. From a traffic flow standpoint, the traffic consultant concluded that there wasn't any concerns. One of the public comments was that there may be concerns with emergency vehicle accesses, and we are exploring a creative solution that would be a pedestrian access out to Little River via the old McCall right-of-way.
Okay.
That essentially would be designed and built to withstand the weight of emergency vehicles, to provide emergency vehicle access in the case that the Dillon Drive access is compromised either at that or surrounding area. So and that would be explored further through the site plan process. So there is an opportunity to definitely bring emergency vehicle access through a secondary outlet if necessary.
Okay. Yeah, I foresaw that maybe that answer. Honestly, I was thinking about that, but I appreciate that response. Thank you. To town administration, this will be my last point, but it has many subpoints, I guess. The one thing that's very frustrating for myself is that, we're certainly hearing both sides of the stories here. And I appreciate that we can have disagreement. That's, a wonderful thing about life that often makes humanity sometimes better. But, we hear from one side, at least my understanding that, height requirements, it's good. And we hear from another side that, no, the height requirements are not acceptable. I'm an engineer, so I base it upon I'd like to see the quantitative, this is what the limit should be, and this is where the proposed is at, and this is what's acceptable. So I think, I noted variables such as height, density, and really some of the official plan conflicts that have been identified by some of the residents, yet it still seems, from administration's point of view, that everything's fine. While I don't expect an answer kind of on all of these tonight, I think as we move forward, if we could make this as clear as possible to everyone, perhaps in a simple table or something presenting it, this is the limit, this is the proposal, this is what it's at, and identify it, red and green. And I think that will, again, help with everyone understanding compromises, what is acceptable for the neighborhood, and ultimately, hopefully help us to realize what we could have, what we could have as an alternative or what it could be. And again, because I think we need to understand the constraints, and perhaps we don't. The one thing I recognize as well, building of new homes, we cannot build them now like we did 20 or 30 years ago. The designs of today are far more energy efficient, are far more, we hope accessible, practical. So what we've done in the past may not, is not really most likely suitable for as we move to the future. And I think we need to be progressive. We've got to do the right things. So people should be aware of these really important aspects. But I leave it like that. And I again, thank everyone for their input. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Jobin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. So my technical questions have been answered. So I'm just going to extend my thanks to the residents, to the developer, to our administration. Whether you're in support of or in opposition of this development, really the time and interest is really testament to why people want to live in Tecumseh. I have visited the site myself, and I have spoken to a few of the residents in the area. And collectively, I just want you to know this council and administration hold everyone's interest in the entire town with respect and great consideration. I do want to thank you all for your professionalism this evening, and we will have some more discussions as it appears. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilor Jobin. Well, I guess I'll be the last to speak, and a couple of them, and I know that our town engineer has been here, and I've got a question for Mr. Bartnick in particular, in terms of, I've heard pretty much everyone in terms of the flood issues and so forth. But I certainly know that whatever development Briday brings forward, I mean, they're responsible in maintaining the water on their site and so forth. So I don't see that any different. My question to you, Phil, as you've heard so many of them talk about, the surface floodings and so forth that are happening on in particular Dillon, which is one of the older streets in the community. And we know it's not a traditional urban design. There's still the rural component to it and so forth. So I got a couple of questions. Number one, in the stormwater master plan that has just been completed by the municipality, I know that there are some diversions, I'm going to say upstream, but more to the east, and to divert waters that traditionally follow the Little River to down towards the Victoria development and that. And just where are we on those, in particular, those developments? And I know that part of it is the diversion into the channel into Lakewood and so forth. So timing wise and what the impacts are going to have as well, that have formulated the decision that there's adequate servicing at the moment.
Thank you, Your Worship. So quite a loaded question, and I do have an answer for you. So I'd like to perhaps start by discussing how storm infrastructure is actually designed. I know there was a lot of comments tonight about flooding that was experienced during the 2016 flooding event and 2017. There was reference to the floodplain of Lake St. Clair. Two separate issues. But when it comes to rainfall events and flooding, obviously the rain events that we had in 2016 and 17 far exceeded any design capacity that we had. The town's infrastructure is typically designed to a 1 and 2 year event or a 1 and 5 year event. In this area, it's more than likely the 1 and 2 year event, which that equates to about 40 millimeters in a 6 hour period. And to put that in relation to the 2016 storm, we had 175 mils in 6 hours. So obviously about a 135 millimeter increase. We saw widespread flooding throughout the town. Stemming from those flooding events, the town did undertake a storm drainage master plan process. It just recently was completed in 2019. And through that process, we undertook a 2D hydraulic model of the entire system, essentially north of County Road 42. And that was analyzing this, not only the storm sewers, but the overland flow routes. And we looked at areas that needed an increased level of service. There was about 35 recommendations coming out of that master plan, totaling about 107 million. Some of those recommendations are within the vicinity of the school, more so to the east. So there are plans to do improvements to the West St. Louis pump station, which is just to the east. There's also plans to do some upgrades to the L'Esperance pumping station as well, which is just to the west. This site, little unique, it will drain northerly. So I think in attachment number 8, there is a design brief put forward by the developer's consultant. It identifies, so it will be draining north through a 750 pipe, which then turns into a 900. When it hits Riverside Drive, it does split going east and west. So there is a portion that goes to L'Esperance, and there is a portion that goes to the West St. Louis pump station drainage area. This development, like every development that comes forward, we do review it internally, and we also engage our consultant who did work on the model. So having the model does give us a tool which provides information to developers on what their release rate will be, as well as their storage requirements and the tailwater conditions in the system, right? So it's very accurate. So having that tool, we're able to give that information on the existing system as it sits today. Obviously, there's improvements that are to be had throughout the system. However, we're pretty much governed with the level of service that we are today. So they will be restricting their stormwater to a 2-year event, pre-development, meaning the site as it once stood with the school. And they're going to be required to store the remainder of that water to ensure there's no adverse impacts downstream. They're doing that by means of kind of a combination between underground storage as well as surface storage in that dry pond scenario during the larger events. I have spoken to a number of property owners on the north side of Dillon, not only throughout this process, but during those rain events of 2016 and throughout our master plan process. Those properties to the north are unique. They're lower than the actual road. And so improvements to the storm infrastructure will help. Improvements to the road cross-section will help. However, those properties will still remain low. We would have to install kind of boulevard catch basins to catch some of the water. So during the 2-year or the 5-year event, the smaller events, the water should be able to drain. It's when those larger events happen and they exceed the capacity of the sewer, the system becomes surcharge, and then it spills out in the lowest lying areas, which would be those properties to the north, which is what happens right now. There's an existing condition where the site as it sits today does overland flow during larger events across Dillon and into the front yards and into the boulevards. So I think as part of this development that will be addressed. The majority of the water will be captured on site and stored and run through that stormwater management system. In relation to some of the other improvements, so I did mention, so the master plan did have 107 million in improvements. The town is implementing some of those solutions. So obviously we were successful with the DMAF grant in October of last year for a project of 26.75 million. We're also proceeding with Manning Road Phase 2 later this year, which is another $4.5–5 million project. We've also triggered the design of the Tecumseh Road storm sewer, which is another element within the master plan. So in preparing for the meeting tonight, the 107 million does seem like a lot. We are looking at probably in the next 5 years, constructing about 31 million of that 107 million. And that 31 million would be spread across 5 of the 8 pumping station service areas. So there is no current plans within that 31 million to address the area of the West St. Louis within this area or the L'Esperance Road pump station. But they're definitely next on the list. And I think with the grant funding that we received and the initiatives that the town are undertaking to date, we're off to a good start on trying to implement some of these solutions.
Okay. So my point, Mr. Bartnick, was regardless of the development, there were plans well in advance in dealing with overland flooding and certainly rain events, which is the big one. I mean, we can't control the lake. We can do the best we can by shoreline protection, which we are undertaking. We did some remedial work there in the past year, and certainly Mr. Zuzik's report, and we're waiting for that, I think sometime in the fall in terms of shoreline protection. But I wanted to make that point very clear that the development or anything within that area is not the trigger for us to make improvements in terms of stormwater issues in the community. It's something that's been well planned under the master plan. My other question, and while you're there, Mr. Bartnick, as well, is that obviously with some of the other concerns that we heard, I think many of them can be addressed under site plan. I think Mr. Hillman explained that quite, and I'm not going to get into a lot of that and that detail, but my concern obviously is we've heard about Dillon, and I know that we have through our life cycling plan, we have our 1, 3, 5 year plan in reconstructing roads and so forth. But with this development and also the demand for active transportation, and then with the inherent trail coming to Riverside Drive, and that's in that general area in that. Where do we stand, or where could we stand? You don't need to maybe answer that this evening, but the horizon of especially Dillon in terms of reconstructing that portion of Dillon from we have to be L'Esperance to Lacoste.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I believe it was mentioned earlier that if the development were to proceed, I think we were looking at perhaps doing some improvements to the road cross section. It is a rural cross section. We would probably look to urbanize it. And I think those details and discussions with the developer would take place through the site plan process. The town does do a roads need study every 5 years. And I believe that section was not slated within the next 5 years for a mill and pave or some sort of repairs. But obviously when opportunities do present themselves to improve the cross section to an urbanized cross section, we do take a very close look at that.
Yeah, and just my point there, that's exactly what we did on Arbor, and
Yep.
The improvements that were made there in the development. But I certainly, I'm okay in those terms, but I'll end by saying thank you as well to all of our residents that have taken time, from their schedule to appear. Mr. Ublansky and your team, thank you, for coming forward and development. The one thing I'll end is by saying that somebody had mentioned that I certainly was in favor of diversification of housing. Absolutely, I always have been. And as they say, the proof's in the pudding. not only in building homes for home ownership, whether it's condominium or single family, the multi-res, but also into the rental as well, where we're seeing Fortis building suites that are going to be for rent, as well as Skyline. As a matter of fact, they're breaking ground now for 140 some units and so forth. That's what communities need. And in particular today, diversification is paramount, in my opinion. Number one, we're an aging population. A lot of empty nesters now and seniors and so forth. And for too many years, in particular, I've seen too many of our citizens who have moved out of our community and moved into other areas where they were able to source the different housing needs that they required. And for folks that it would, for me, I think it's important if somebody spends 25, 30 and you hear it in those neighborhoods and the reason why they want to live in the community and so forth. It, to me, is wherever you begin your family, you should be able to end in your community that you live in. And to me, that those communities that really exercise that ability are the ones that are going to be completely successful. And we need growth. I mean, that's the reality. You know, we need to sustain ourselves so that we can protect the tax base and so forth. And at the end of the day, it's about creating a community that is sustainable, affordable, and livable. And I think, and I must say, on behalf of my counselors that I've worked with, and some for a lot of years, they've always kept that practice in place. And I think that what we need to do is find some common ground so that, again, we can move forward in the development that we can all be proud of. And I think we've got some work to do. We need to, you know, and we will roll up our sleeves. And again, I want to commend the community. I know that Tecumseh as a whole are very passionate. They're very protective of their community. And that's one of the things what I love about this community as well. And also those who have come in and want to invest into our community and live in our community. They're not going anywhere. I think, you know, so I certainly want to extend my thanks to you, David, and certainly the Blansky family. You've been here for a while, and I know I've heard that you didn't live in the community, but one individual mentioned that to me, and I corrected them. And I said, no, he lives in the community, and so forth. So to everyone, I certainly want to thank administration, you know, for getting us on this meeting here. I know that we had to reschedule one, and it's, I think it was mentioned by Deputy Mayor Ricchetti, and I appreciate the fact that we were able to concentrate solely on this particular issue this evening. So I want to certainly thank administration for your hard work as well, and certainly your professionalism in putting this program certainly together for everyone. For those that are still streaming and that have made presentations and haven't sent them in, please email them or drop them off to the attention of our clerk. Obviously, we want to have that into the minutes and formulating the minutes of this meeting. And if there's no further certainly questions or comments, then we do have some communications that I want to put into the record as well. Receipt, there's 23 pieces of communication. So if I could have council move and support Deputy Mayor Bichetti, Councillor Dowie, that we receive these the pieces of communications for the record. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. And also, members of council, if I could have a motion to receive the Briday Development Southside Dillon Drive Public Meeting #2 report. So if I could have receipt of that meeting report. Counselor Tonio and Counselor Houston. All in favor? Opposed, if any of that is carried. And if there's no further questions or comments, then members of council, certainly adjournments in order. At this stage, Counselor Tonio, Counselor Altenhoff, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Once again, to all of our delegations this evening, thank you for your indulgence in the meeting, council, and certainly Town Tecumseh administration as well. And I certainly want to bid you a good night.